Did you put Christmas on a credit card? Don't stress out about that extra holiday spending. SaveWithConrad.com can help you consolidate all of your high interest rate credit cards into one much lower monthly payment. SaveWithConrad.com has helped families just like yours save up to $800 a month. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket. And did I mention no payments until March? So don't make saving money a resolution next year. Make it happen today at SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, how are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Connie. It is great to be back on here with you. I don't know how long my good friend, Brother Brother Love's going to be out, but I'm filling in the captain's chair for him. He's welcome back anytime, but it's good filling in for my good buddy.
Man, I'm having a blast with you, too. I hope you guys had a great and happy holiday. I can't believe we're right here at the end of the year. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. What is the New Year's Eve plan at the Layfield household this year?
Very little. You know, I used to go to Iraq every year. And so once I got back, before that, I went, used to go hunting with Hermes Sadler every year, the race car driver. Such a wonderful guy. Me and Ron used to go. And now I don't have anything to do. So it's kind of cool. I'm just going to sit in, probably be in bed by 10 o'clock or so, and get up the next morning and say, hey, it's a new year.
Well, there you go. I hope that everybody has a happy and safe holiday. They're not a sponsor this week, but I want to remind everybody to grab an Uber, get a ride share, take care of yourself. This is a tragic night for a lot of families, and we really want to encourage you to do the right thing if you're going to be celebrating with alcohol. And if you've got to be bounced back in time for work the next day, Z-Biotics helped me out on Christmas Eve. I had a great holiday. How was your Christmas holiday, Mr. Layfield?
Outstanding. You know, my goal in life is to have Dave Silva at my house for holidays. That's my only goal in life. So I haven't had it happen yet, but that's my goal.
Well, we can make that happen.
I'd love it. Ship him up. I'll pay the shipping.
Don't pay the overnight. That'd be spendy.
Vader one time they were going to the military was going to ship him out of Kuwait. That when they had a huge crate, they were going to sneak him out of Kuwait in. True story. They went to Briscoe, but we know when Vader slapped the reporter around, and the military came to Briscoe and said, "Hey, we've got a way to sneak him out of the country. We've done this before." And Briscoe called Vince, and Vince's like, "Are you planning on doing that?" And Jerry goes, "No." Vince goes, "God, thank God. Oh, my God." Yeah, they had like a crate, I don't know, it was maybe from Barnum's and Bailey Circus or something, but they had a crate, and they were going to sneak him out of the country, get him to Paris, and then let him loose and let him run around.
Can you imagine the visual of what you just said? Like, that sounds like a cartoon. I mean,
that's true story. 100% true. The military offered to sneak Vader out of Kuwait.
I just realized I just watched Trading Places with Eddie Murphy recently. That's an underrated Christmas movie, by the way.
Wonderful movie.
If they'd have put him in the ape costume, that is a Trading Places storyline.
That's right. Yeah.
Gosh. Well, we've got a big story for us today because this is the most unusual Something to Wrestle maybe we've ever done, in that we're talking about private conversations between Vince McMahon and John Layfield, something that was never really able to be disclosed in the Torch or the Observer or any other sort of research material, because there's only one person on earth who can debunk what we're about to run through, and he ain't talking. So we put it on a poll, and everybody wants to hear what Vince McMahon was saying in your ear when you were doing commentary all those years. And this has been something that we've heard about from other people. Certainly guys, like Mick Foley have come out and said that, man, that was just not for him. And he's legendary for the way he would handle his commentators and the things that we would hear he's saying, but we never heard it. But this is actually the first time that you and I have done a show where we didn't sort of dictate the schedule to you and we said, hey, next week, here's what we're thinking. You said, hey, what if, because I've never told these stories, what if we talked about Vince being in my ear on commentary? So when you were excited to talk about it, I was excited to talk about it. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about Vince McMahon producing commentary?
Oh, there's a million things. Look, Michael Cole and I were on the headset with Vince and Kevin Dunn, and a lot of other people were on headsets, but Vince a lot of times would talk to us during the show. Sometimes he'd talk to us about the show. Sometimes he'd talk to just me about the show, because he had no one to talk to back there because he's got his headphones on. So he's not really got a chance to talk to somebody. So he would talk to us. And so we got insight into Vince for years that nobody had insight into. I mean, we heard the stuff that went on all throughout the backstage area that literally nobody else heard. Now, there's other guys who had, better access and things like that, but we heard all the stuff directly from Vince. And the big misnomer is that Vince dictated everything. 100% not true. Vince was the best producer I've ever worked with. He would give you very succinct phrases, and sometimes I'd be one word behind him because I trusted him so much, and he would lead us to a place. And a lot of times Vince wouldn't give out, we'll go through this later, Vince used to give us notes directly to me and Michael Cole, which was cool because he opened everything up. He would tell us about creative going forward because he knew we could trust us. In the creative meetings, which was the production meetings they call, but they're also a mix of creative, Vince wouldn't do that because there were always stooges in the production meetings. So Vince wouldn't open up everything. So when Vince would give you commentary a lot of times, sometimes he'd say stuff, and I know this is not going to be a shock, that made no sense whatsoever, but it would make sense a week later. People get him all kinds of credit for not making sense on some stuff. Vince nearly always had a plan, and sometimes he'd tell you something. I would just say it. For one, it's his sandbox. It's his company. We're not real commentators, by the way. Michael Cole used to always say, if I get in the Hall of Fame, which Michael Cole will one day, yes, he said, I'm going to get up there and say, I'm a fake wrestler called a fake sport with a fake name. Thank you. And that's it. We're not real commentators. So when Vince would say something, I would just repeat it. A lot of times it'd play out a week later sometimes because Vince knew what was coming forward. It was pretty cool to when you'd say something that was disconnected and, something's coming up that's pretty cool.
I appreciate hearing, because I wouldn't have imagined that you guys would have been privy to all of the future plans and creative and things like that. But I guess when it gets to that sort of inner circle like that, it's possible. I wanted to ask you, I think the first time I remember seeing you do commentary is in the 90s. There were various Raw episodes, and you joined JR and the King. Is that really your first taste of doing this, or had you done this in another life somewhere else?
No, I'd done it down in Texas. There's some old pictures of me and Doyle. Oh my goodness, he's a good friend, a big tall guy. I'm gonna hate. He sees this show, he's gonna hate me for it. They used to do commentary, really good, talented guy, and I did some back in Texas for them. In Japan and in Europe, they didn't have any. Of course, I didn't speak the language in Mexico when I was down there, so I didn't do much there. So this is my first really big taste of it. But we cut a million freaking promos down in Texas. We used to do the bicycle, essentially the tape where you'd cut a promo for, okay, you got the Von Erichs Friday night at Will Rogers cage match, go to give us 2 minutes. Okay, you got Killer Tim Brooks and Watch a Hackchi and a lumberjack match, give me a minute and a half, go. So you'd sit there and just do promo after promo without any prep for it except for time, who you had, and what the match was. So I was used to talking, but not doing a commentary that much. So this is my first time really to do something, especially on a big stage like that.
So I also wanted to ask, with regards to making the call for you being the guy out there on the headsets back in the 90s, is that Vince McMahon messing with Vince Russo, perhaps? I'm not bringing that up to be funny. I know that there's a certain contingent of Russo fans who are upset with you and I right now because we maybe weren't so polite in your discussion about the Brawl for All. But we heard during that episode that he being Russo, pronouns pal, was not really a fan of your voice. He thought you were too Southern, or you needed to speak less Southern, or whatever. So when you get these opportunities, is Russo still there in that era, as best you recall, or is that Vince messing with Vince?
I don't remember. I don't remember if Russo was there for that or not. Just the times all mixed together, being almost 30 years ago. I don't remember. I do know that was McMahon that wanted that, because Vince liked me when I came in. He didn't know me. And so that's a big difference. That's not something like they went out to get me. They did not go out to get me. I showed up on the doorstep and they thought, oh my God, we might need to sign this guy, because if not, he's probably going down to WCW, which looked like to be the case. So all of a sudden they're stuck with me, and they don't really know what they have. Vince, when I first met him in Titan Towers with J.J. Dillon and Lisa Wolf, told me that. He goes, I have no idea anything about you. And he goes, tell me about you. The first Vince had met me, knew about me, probably had even heard of me. So Vince was trying to find things for me to do, and he had no idea what I could do, what I couldn't do. And I do know this commentary came from Vince McMahon.
I wanted to ask you about his philosophy, talking about Vince McMahon, his philosophy on commentary. You mentioned a minute ago that Michael Cole's going to say, hey, I was a fake commentator. But, the rule that you see a lot of times in sports feels like it would be different in wrestling. A lot of times in baseball, basketball, football, you're trying to predict what's going to happen and sort of explain why it might happen and what the strategy is. But I imagine in pro wrestling, that's not the way you do it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And people have a hard time doing that. Commentators, great commentators, play-by-play guys that come in have a hard time transitioning from sports to wrestling because you're a step behind instead of a step ahead. So like in football, when you're sitting there and you've got a play coming up and the play-by-play guy or the color commentator will say, look, the cornerback has rolled up on the wide receivers, going man-to-man coverage. Look at the MAC linebacker on the strong side, on the same side. He's inching up. Because you got a guy in man coverage on the wide receiver that frees up that linebacker to blitz, he's probably coming. That's huge to a fan because when a fan sees that, they're sitting there with their family or sitting there, all of a sudden they're in the game. They're going, oh, I see that now. The cornerback's manned up. That frees up the linebacker to blitz on that side. He's inching forward. It's going to be cool. He might get the quarterback. And it really enhances the game by giving away what could happen or being a step ahead. In wrestling, it kills it. If you say, oh, there's somebody behind that pillar, I wonder if it's the Undertaker. You just ruined 6 weeks of surprise. Right. So you have to be a step behind. And because of that, you appear dumb at times. And if people look at it and go, that's the Undertaker. You can see it's the Undertaker. But you say, who is that? Yeah. Because you want the fan to realize who it is and let them come to that association.
I've seen some criticism of that online where perhaps, and this is the internet wrestling community who maybe can be cynical about everything at times, but the narrative is, boy, Vince wants his commentators to look stupid because it's plain to see for anyone what this is. And now they're supposed to say, who is this? Like you haven't spent 30 years with the man. You know exactly who it is. How would you respond to that IWC criticism?
It's the same with talent. You say they always brought in talent just to bury them. This doesn't bring in talent to bury people. Now, there may be some isolated cases. I don't know that for sure because I can't read his mind, but I was there for so much of it. And I was, again, when we went and did commentary with Vince back in the day, before he put everything into production and creative rooms, we got to sit there with Vince, and he would unveil everything in his mind. Not everything. I'm sure he kept some stuff back, in the bag he's bringing out later. But he would let us know his thoughts on talent. About this talent's going to get over. We got to do it this way. We had a long talk, which we can discuss later, about how we dealt with Ascension. I got all kinds of heat over that, but there was a plan for that. Same as we had a plan for MVP. We had a plan for a lot of these different guys that we brought in, but how we would address the commentary. And Vince doesn't bring guys in to look dumb. It's his product. Now, I don't doubt there's times he had a vendetta against somebody that was at a different company and he brought him in just to bury him. Don't blame him. I'd have done the same thing. I think any basically human being would. It's human nature. But that didn't happen. It didn't happen like he wants guys to look stupid. He wants the fans to feel like they're part of the show. And to feel like you're part of the show, sometimes the announcer does do stupid things. I would sit there and go, who is that? I know who it is. I can see him right in front of me. But I want the fan to come to that realization first. It's part of being part of the show instead of being a legit commentator. And there's a huge difference.
I appreciate that. It's part of being the show versus being a legit commentator. Because one of the other things you probably do in wrestling, I would imagine this works in the Vince McMahon world, we're not necessarily there to call the moves. We're there to tell stories, right?
Oh, my God. One of the first lessons I learned was when I first started doing commentary. The guy threw a drop kick or Saito suplex or something like that, and I called it. And Vince got in my ear. And we can go through all this later. We start talking about Mick Foley and, the difference that I don't know what happened with Mick. Mick had a different reaction and experience than I did. But Vince would be so good about being very patient with guys, like talking about with me. And talking about with King, talking about with Booker specifically. Now, with Michael Cole and JR, there was no patience. I mean, zero. Those treat us completely different. But Vince comes in my ear. He's very patient, as he always was. And he said, John, it's not radio. He goes, I know it's a drop kick. He goes, no one cares if it's a drop kick. He goes, I need to know why that guy threw it, why it matters, and why do I care about that individual? Otherwise, whatever he does makes no difference whatsoever. So I know you got a lot of hardcore fans that want the suplexes called correctly. And to me, it's not necessarily an either or. you don't have to say we're not calling moves. You can call the moves. You can call them correctly. But what's so much more important is, why does that move matter? And why does this person matter? Because that's what draws money.
You were obviously there. I mean, I know that, I'll be honest. I saw a change in Michael Cole's commentary really for the first time in my experience when there was that special on the WWE Network, Beast of the East or something. Brock Lesnar was wrestling in Japan, and it was basically a WWE house show, but they were doing commentary. And it felt like for the first time we heard Michael Cole just calling wrestling like a legitimate commentator, not necessarily pushing what's trending on Twitter or the brand new t-shirt, or he's not in sell mode. He's not in Vince mode. He was just calling wrestling. And I really enjoyed that presentation. It felt more engaged in the matches and what was happening. And I really enjoyed that. And that's when I was like, hey, you know what? I've been looking at Michael Cole wrong all these years. Like, this dude's really, really good. I do believe he is going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. But I wanted to ask, like, do you think there is something to, maybe there's too much Vince and not enough of the commentary, or is there a right mix, or where do you land on that?
Yeah, it's hard to say because, understand, people say, oh, Vince was the worst thing to happen to wrestling. I hear that, a lot of times. He took a company that he bought from his father in 1981 for $1 million and sold it for $9.3 billion and retained the rights. Now, I was in professional wrestling, okay? And I was also in sports entertaining. There ain't no comparison.
Okay.
There ain't no comparison as far as money, as far as medical, as far as how you're treated. What Vince did was he changed the business massively for the better. Believe me, I was there. I started in the territories. I saw how shitty it was. I saw how shitty promoters were. I saw how they treated you. I saw how you couldn't do anything about it. I had broken ribs over in Europe one time, and I had a match in the afternoon, and I came back, and Otto Vance was there, and Otto was a good man, but he's one of these old school guys. And he said, what? He goes, you okay? I said, no, doctor said I broke a couple ribs. He goes, well, be careful tonight in that German accent, that Austrian accent, rather. And he says, be careful tonight because you have a cage match. So it wasn't like you need some time off. I didn't take any time off. I'd sip a bottle of Jack Daniels because I was scared of taking pain pills because so many guys were addicted to them. So I'd sit there and drink half a bottle of Jack Daniels to go to the ring every night because my ribs were broken, and I'm peeing blood. That was professional wrestling, and I have nothing against that. I wouldn't change that for the world. But I've seen professional wrestling, when people talk about professional wrestling and sports entertainment, there is no comparison. And most of that is attributed to Vince McMahon. So when people say, well, Vince really hurt wrestling, no, he didn't. Brother, we're standing on the pillars that he and Kevin Dunn built of what we are right now.
I do want to ask you a little bit about some of the different things we've heard as fans. Like, I know that there's a list of banned words, but before we get into that, I want to remind you that you don't have to have banned foods. Lumen can help you figure out when you're supposed to eat what. See, that's what really Lumen is all about. They've been a longtime sponsor with us here on the program, and it's going to help you be a metabolic coach. Lumen is a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs. And then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even your stress management. Let's just be honest. Anytime you've read about a crash diet or something like that, that is a best practice that worked for someone somewhere. But will it work for you? If you've tried one, you may know that, well, your results may vary. And that's because everyone's different, and so is everyone's metabolism. But with Lumen, it's like a life hack for you. You don't have to give up cheeseburgers. You just got to know when you can eat them. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know exactly what's going on with your metabolism. Again, meaning whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after your workouts and your meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And then Lumen gives you tips to help you keep on top of your health game. Here's how it works. You think about your metabolism almost like your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health with each breath. Lumen's recommendations are designed to improve your pre- and post-workout fueling for better performances and recovery, so you can power through your toughest workouts and add on muscle mass. So if you want to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go right now to lumen.me/wrestle. You'll get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/wrestle for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's episode. So listen, man, we've had a lot of fun talking about these sort of banned words.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to say belt. It's a title. You're not supposed to say hospital. It's a medical facility. Can you talk us through some of those banned words?
Conrad, I'd be happy to, but let me do a better job of answering a little bit about Michael Cole, the question. I didn't answer the question very well about how Michael has changed his commentary so much. Yeah. Michael, to me, is the GOAT, and there's not a debate. Michael is the greatest of all time, period. And that's no offense at all to our good friend JR and Gordon Soley, who I did not know. JR was legendary. We're talking about great or greater. We're not talking about great and one that's not good. I put Michael Cole and Gordon Soley and Jim Ross as the top 3 play-by-play guys of all time. I give Michael the nod because I for one, I work with Michael more. I know Michael better. I think Michael is a genius, and I don't use that term lightly. I think Michael has helped build that company by what he's done. A lot of people conflate Michael Cole's heel run and following JR with Michael Cole. And so there was a lot of animosity toward Cole during that time because of the heel run, because he did such a good job with it. I think now Gorilla and Vince were also very good. Vince doing a play-by-play guy back in the 70s and 80s when he did it by himself. He was really good. People loved to bash Vince. Oh, he wasn't that good. People loved to appear smart by being negative. Nobody wants to say he was good because people say, oh, if he was good, what about in 1950 when Leroy McGurk was calling it blind? He was better. People love bringing up crazy shit out of the gunny sack to show how smart they are. On the color commentary side, there's no doubt Bobby Heenan was the greatest ever. Nobody, not even a question. I mean, when people talk about the greatest commentator, they're talking about who follows Bobby Heenan. It's like talking about the greatest tag team. They're talking about who follows the Road Warriors. Jerry Lawler is number 2, and I don't think anybody else is close to those two. I think those two are by far the best. But Michael, there's a big difference in what Michael has now as compared to what Michael had when I had commentary with him. When you've already got the $1 billion contracts, when you've already got the Netflix deal, you can do commentary different. Now, he doesn't have Vince in his ear, so there's not that overproducing if you think it was overproducing. So, but Vince was trying to get to a place. They're at that place now. Now Michael can just sit back and call the sport. And Michael, he's fantastic, man. I mean, he is so freaking good. He's always been that good. But he had to get us TV deals. He had to get us advertisements. We had to pay the bills. We had so much to do, and there were so many things to push. I cannot begin to tell you how much traffic there is on a live wrestling show. I mean, Vince and Kevin beat his ear, and this is why Michael's doing commentary. And they do stuff like, okay, we're going to skip 55, go to 56. 57 is going to be live. We're going to do that on camera. 58, we're going to move back. It's now 61. This is why Michael's still calling a finish. And Michael would sit there and be taking notes. That man is unbelievable how good he is writing stuff down. That's why you've only had just a few play-by-play guys in the last 40 years. Think about how many few play-by-play guys you've had that have stuck around. And there's a reason for that. It's really hard to do this stuff. Now, when you talk about the banned words.
Well, hang on. Before you do that, I wanted to say, I have always felt like you're a football guy like me. You'll get this reference. Steve Young is a Hall of Fame, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But when he had to step into Joe Montana's shoes, there was pushback from 49er fans and NFL fans. Well, he's not Joe Montana. Well, of course he's not. He's just starting here. Like, he's just getting going. And anybody who had to follow Joe Montana was going to have impossibly big shoes to fill. And I feel like that's what Michael Cole was up against. And then you sprinkle on the whole heel stuff too. Man, now we're really doubling down on the way fans perceive him in real life, but the perception and the reality could be totally different. Because if Michael Cole had been the voice of another show, whether it was ECW or WCW or TNA, he would have been celebrated. But because he was following JR and he just wasn't JR, and JR was such a beloved figure, it was just an impossible task. I think the Joe Montana, Steve Young transition is the way I would describe that from JR to Michael Cole. Hall of Famers, no doubt. Mm-hmm. But man, you want to talk about a tough act to follow. And it's not based on how great he was. It's the love that the fan base had for him, right?
100%. That is a great analogy. And that's exactly what I think. I think the two guys who had the hardest role in professional wrestling was John Cena, having to follow the Attitude Era and be the champion during basically a G-rated era when you can no longer flip off your balls. You no longer have, beautiful women that are half naked. You can no longer drink beer out there. You have rules now and standards, and it's G instead of R. JR was the same. JR was out there calling Stone Cold, drinking beer, running over people with beer trucks and running into rings and doing crazy, crazy stuff. And all of a sudden you got this G era. And you got John Cena, who's hamstrung, who I think, to my opinion, I've said it many, many times, the only person in the history of the business that could have carried the company during that time. He did an incredible job. Michael Cole is the same.
Yeah.
He's followed one of the greatest commentators ever in Jim Ross in one of the greatest eras ever, the Attitude Era. And now he's having to call this product down. People going like, why aren't people drinking beer? So looking at the guy that they see on camera, it's Michael Cole. And plus he's a heel bashing JR because that's his character. And they just conflate everything together and just say, oh, we hate Michael. Michael's one of the few guys that could have done it, and you see him now being there. I guess he's got the longest run, I think, now of any commentator ever under Vince McMahon. That is beyond incredible. And he can work with anybody. You bring in Pat McAfee, who I think they are an incredible duo.
Yeah. He's
been fantastic. You bring in whoever you want. Michael's been able to work with them.
Hey, how do you think? I know we're spending a lot of time on Michael Cole here, and I'm for it. How do you think he handled that negativity and criticism online? Like, I understand that it's not his job. His job is to make his boss happy. But I'm sure every time he logs into social or people would share stuff with him, it has to be like just exhausting, right?
Yeah, Michael's a unique guy in the fact, I don't know if it's water off a duck's back. I don't know if he, I can't read his mind, but I was with him, all the time. We traveled together. Michael came and stayed with me in Bermuda. We're good friends. And Michael, it didn't seem to bother him. At some point, like if you're looking at social media and everything's positive and you have one person on your phone that says you're an asshole, you're going, why would they do that? And it starts to bother you. But if everybody on your phone says you're an asshole, it's like white noise at some point. Like, okay, you know what? Screw them. If I am, there's nothing I can do about it. If there isn't, I don't care anyway.
Well said. Well, listen, I got how you processed it because you were supposed to be a heel most of your career, like Jeff Jarrett. And I've got a lot of DMs and a lot of text messages from people who were in the business but maybe never met you or never worked with you. And they would say, man, I decided I was never going to listen to that show as long as John was sitting in for Bruce. But I finally broke down and listened to one, and man, I was all wrong. He's not a huge asshole like I thought. And so I'm seeing messages like that. And so I know, like, okay, well, he's probably just like Jeff, like, I was a heel, guys. That means I was doing my job. But for Michael Cole, and I know there was a hiccup where he was a heel, but for the majority of his career, he was not. He was just the commentator. And it's like, we're hating on the guy for doing exactly what his boss tells him to do at his job. Like, what an unreal thing to be upset about.
Yeah, and one time Michael's a smart guy, but somebody overwhelmed him once with all the negative commentary about it because there was everything he did was wrong after that heel run. Everybody hated everything he did. It was all he was so good at being a heel. I mean, what else do you want out of a heel? He's one of the best heels we had. I wish the guy was 6'3" and had a 265-pound body. He would have headlined about 18 WrestleManias. He was so freaking good. But he was on his phone. He goes, man, everybody's hammering me. I said, okay, Michael, let's look at this and see how many people are hammering you. And he goes, my whole phone's full. And he shows it to me. I said, let's count them. So we counted them. And I can't remember what it was, like 20, 21, whatever it was. And I said, how many followers do you have? And he was like 1 million. And I said, so you're basing your mood today on 20 people? He goes, you're right. Fuck them. Well, but you forget because it's on your phone, It seems so personal. And there's no algebraic equation. I used to get in arguments with the social media guys with Vince. And they would say, we got so much feedback on this. Okay, are those 4,000 mentions, which could be 1,000 people tweeting 4 times, by the way, is that really indicative of our 2 million audience in North America or whatever it was at the time? Does that really translate into that means 700,000 people, or does it really mean 1,000 people? You don't know. I think that's why social media sometimes is held in too much esteem.
Well, something that I know that has been a hot topic amongst the IWC is that list of banned words. Was there ever an official list, or do you just discover them and now y'all know it? But I think there's been a format that leaked before that did have like a list of don't say this, say that sort of thing. Is that on every format? What can you tell us about these banned words?
So let me tell you about the difference between Michael Cole and I. I love Michael, but we are so different. We're like the odd couple. And I can remember if Felix or Oscar was the messy one, but I'm the messy one. So I'd get into a hotel room. We didn't split rooms, but then, the company was picking up our rooms. When I was working for the TV side, not the talent side, I would get in and I just unload my bag and go to the bar, whatever I do, and shit would be like that the rest of the trip. I don't care if I'm there for a month or if I'm there for one night. I don't, nothing bothers me. I don't care. I'm not moving into this place. I don't care where my stuff is. Michael would come in and he'd put stuff in the drawers. He'd put stuff in the closet. He'd have stuff, paced out on the bathroom. We're completely different this way. So Michael was the head of the announcers, and he did a wonderful job. He was the perfect guy for that, by the way, because of what I'm telling you. Michael's a very well-organized, very smart guy, and just different from me. I would be like, who's your announcer now? I don't know, Vince. It's somebody. Michael was like, who's your announcer? Oh, it's so-and-so. He's from so-and-so college. Michael had it all down. So Michael at one point wrote like the announcer's Bible, trying to help people. Okay. And I believe in that because I don't think I ever read it. Don't tell Michael. I didn't read that shit. I was there when he tried it. So, and he knows I did because a little different level than the young guy coming in than the old guy that had knew what was supposed to happen and was not supposed to happen. But I think of the list of banned words, I believe was in that announcer's Bible. I don't know that for sure, but there was an announcer's Bible, I believe, at one point that Michael had written.
So belt, is that a word that was on
the list? Absolutely. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I mean, these idiots out there, we got to say belt, we got to say strap, okay, say something that just denigrates the product. I agree completely. A belt keeps up your pants. It's stupid. You want to do an insider term just to try to get over with, like I say, your 40 people that respond to you on Twitter. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. I've seen so much. I saw some rugby guys that were trying to get rugby here in the States, and they were using European words because it was the fancy words. Nobody understands that shit. Call it a title. Call it something prestigious. I hate when the UFC guys, and it's just a thing for me now because of this being with Vince for so long. He's like, I won this belt. I won this belt. Man, say it's the title. Say it's the championship. I completely agree with Vince McMahon on belt as compared to championship or title.
I'm actually looking at the list right now, and this may actually
there's a list.
Yeah, there's a list, and this
awesome.
The Bible. Here's what we're talking about. It says passive aggressive words. The words you choose are important. They can build or bury someone. There's a difference between Cena was upset by this and asked for a rematch, and Cena was furious and demanded a rematch. This is what we would use for a good guy. Who was the bad guy? Who was the good guy? It's good, simple storytelling. You will always make this clear with your words that you choose to use. That feels like part of this Bible. It doesn't say that it's the Bible up there, but there's other little details that say things like, nobody knows dates. Everybody knows when in 2 weeks is. Everyone knows when tomorrow is, etc. Watch the monitor. Call what you see on the screen, not what you know will appear or you see happening when you're in the arena. Words to avoid. Here we go. Belt or strap. We don't have belts or straps. We have championships, titles. The belts represent something. Talk about what it represents. Hard work and dedication, or what it means. Accomplishment of goals. Bullseye for others. He also has on the list the business and our industry. Do you remember those being banned words?
No, I don't. And I think I've said that before, so I don't remember that. I remember, I try to stay away from stuff like that because it was too inside baseball. And I knew things were inside baseball. You don't want to say the business, or it makes it feel like it's too small. I've always had a problem with the locker room. Now, Vince, I don't think did. I don't know that for sure because I never talked to him about that. But nobody gives a shit about the locker room. And you think about what these guys are making millions of dollars now, these big stars, and they should, and I'm happy for them. But you think they're in a community locker room back there? No, they may be. That's not what you want to put over to the fans that it is. You want to think that they're in their private locker room. You want to think they're in, I've always gotten mad at anybody, heels or baby faces, that carry their own bags into the arena. I've told guys forever, why you're supposed to be a star. I mean, you see Michael Jordan walking in back in the day when he'd have his bag with him. No, somebody be carrying it for him. There's a lot of things like that I think were just simple part of what Vince would want to make it appear bigger than this little thing that was an old Carney event that people that were in the know knew. It wanted to be something that was like the NFL or like Major League Baseball was completely perceived differently.
Other things that are on this list are words to avoid. Remember that being a Vinceism?
No, I don't. Vince did not like any type of initials. I knew that, so I would have never said something like that. Yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know that particularly was something that was bad. Vince didn't like a lot of things like very, like you're very happy. Learn English. Say ecstatic. Say something. Vince didn't like that because he thought it sounded redneckish or stupid. And so he wanted better words. He wanted a more sophisticated commentary than that. He hated the word that. Boy, say that arm. Oh my God. Woo, that's a no-no. That is a no-no. It's the arm or it's the right arm. It's not that arm. Vince hated the term that and the. Wow. I'll tell you a funny story one time. We're coming off air in a pay-per-view, and we did the old Von Erich cage door finish, where he slammed the door in the guy's head or something like that, whatever it was. And Michael used to have, when you go 15 seconds left or 20 seconds left, Michael had the best notes, and he would sit there and read those notes. And he was so good. I mean, so professional. He had it all written out. He was really good, and he could read them like it was, he was ad-libbing. So good. So Michael's going over the finish, promoting to either Raw the next day or Monday or the next pay-per-view, whatever we were doing. Maybe it was a Raw or promoting to a pay-per-view, whatever we're doing. We're pushing something coming up. Michael's about 7 seconds from being off air. So it was off air. So I think it must have been, I don't know if it's pay-per-view or TV. And he said everything was going fine until they hit him with that door. And you hear this baritone billionaire freaking erupt. I mean, erupt. We're 7 seconds from going off air, and Vince has had this wonderful pay-per-view. He's so happy until Michael says that door, and Vince goes, "Michael, did you go to Syracuse, you illiterate son of a bitch? What the? It's fucking the door, not that door." And Michael's trying to go off air, and Vince is sitting there yelling about that door and the door. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And Michael read the whole thing like Vince wasn't even there. It was absolutely tremendous.
My God. What about just the word pro wrestling? I know that has been a thing maybe since the beginning. And Bruce has talked about this before, that he didn't get it at first, and then he did. Because we don't have pro wrestlers, we have superstars.
Yep.
We have athletes, we have stars. We don't have pro wrestlers. Do you remember just pro wrestler being a word that we're not going to use? Do you remember anyone getting their finger wagged at for using the term pro wrestler or something like that?
Guys wanted to die on this hill, and I thought it was stupid. Guys wanted to get in pro wrestler, and everybody go, "Oh, he said pro wrestler. Oh, good for you. Good for you." That's going to get you a hell of a push. I never understood why people wanted to die on this hill. Vince wanted sports entertainment. He wanted superstar. He wanted to create something different than pro wrestler. You got to understand, Vince came up, Toots Mont helped get Vince Sr. started, one of the original old Carney guys, So you want to differentiate yourself from the days of the VFW halls, of the high school gyms, of the roller derby. And I get that. Now, today, people don't associate it with anything like that. So it's different now. And now if you say pro wrestling, I think it has a different connotation than what it had 20 years ago. But 20 years ago when I was there, it was a negative connotation. And I know people that were in the know like that because that was their part of their inner circle and made them feel like they were part of something that nobody else knew. But that's not where you make money. You don't make money by catering to your hardcore fans. You make money by Stone Cold bringing in a family of four, or by The Rock bringing in this family that wants to come in on a Thanksgiving weekend or a Christmas and say, "Hey, let's go to the wrestling and see this guy, The Rock. He's fantastic." That's where you make it. And so you want to differentiate yourself between the old VFW halls, for lack of a better term, and superstars. Nowadays, that's not the case because people assume, pro wrestling, you're the guys who sell out in Global Life Field. You're the guys who sell out the Meadowlands. You're the guys who sell out these big arenas. It's different now. But back then, I completely agreed with it, that it was important to characterize your guys differently than what the insiders would say.
What about little things like hospital and medical center?
I never understood that. Vince wanted always to keep things on a more cerebral level. And so that was, I think, the reason for the medical center. And plus, he didn't want people to be able to call the hospital, I think was a lot of it. So you didn't want to say he's at the Baltimore hospital, because people would call the hospital back then.
Got you. That makes sense.
But if he's at a local medical center, you have no idea where he went. He could have gone to an outpatient emergency room or something. So that way you have the plausible deniability of saying, well, he was at a different place.
You know what? All these years I made fun of that and didn't understand it, but what you just said makes all the sense in the world. You don't want to actually have fans calling the hospital and interfering with people.
Right. And if you give them a name, you give them an actual place. So if you said you went to the Baltimore hospital, it's easy to call it.
Yeah.
If you say you went to a local medical facility in Baltimore, you have no idea where they went.
That's right. Wow.
Now the word Vince hated, I don't know, it's not going to be on there, because people should be smart enough not to say it, is the word prick. For some reason, you can get away with calling somebody a son of a bitch, a bastard, an asshole. But if you called somebody a prick, that's what Brad Maddox got fired for. Remember Brad Maddox? He was talented as he could be. I remember Vince seeing him backstage one time, and I was sitting by Vince, and he was doing a promo, and he goes, "Man, that kid is special." I mean, Vince really liked him, and I don't know exactly what all he got fired for, but he said "prick" in the promo. Vince thought that was the most classless word ever. I once called Shawn Michaels that in a promo. I said, "You're a selfish prick" or something. I didn't realize how bad Vince hated it. I come back and he's like, we have sponsors here. And the first time he ever ripped me on language. And I didn't realize that was the word he hated so bad until the Brad Maddox thing happened. And that's, I'm pretty sure that was the thing that pushed it over the edge, was that's what got him fired. Vince, for some reason, thought that was the most classless word there was.
Well, I, for one, love talking about pricks on this show, and that's why BlueChew has been a day one sponsor. Let's get your prick as hard as it can go. They say first impressions are important, but what about lasting impressions? That's where BlueChew comes in. It's going to make your prick harder, longer. That's what we're talking about. Longer lasting, stronger erections for your prick. It's all Prick Jones over here at BlueChew.com. It's an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. So if you're looking to see how hard you can get your prick, but you're also looking for a deal, BlueChew's for you. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, and the best part is it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. BlueChew wants you to have the confidence to perform at your best. So go discover your options for your prick at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code WRESTLE at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is WRESTLE, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast. So listen, on these banned words list, this is a fun list that's out there. And I don't know how much of this is real, but you mentioned a minute ago that he doesn't like the initials. And you see right there, it says DQ. That doesn't mean Dairy Queen. That's disqualification.
He hated those. Hated them. Absolutely hated them. I mean, that is something Vince very rarely would lose his temper. Now, I say temper. He lost his temper often with Michael Cole and Jeff. I cannot explain enough in enough detail how much differently he treated guys like me, King, and Booker than as he compared to Cole and JR. Now he'd rip those guys for almost anything, but for us, that's one thing that he would get on to us about.
And there are certain industry words, I guess, like feud. That's not allowed. Other words might be like shot, like a title shot. They also don't prefer the term house show. They instead want it to be live event. One of the little things that I found interesting is don't say backstage. Use in the back or in the locker room area. Backstage does sort of sound like it is more of a performance and less of a sport. So the locker room area sounds more sporty. Is that the way you would perceive that?
100%. Vince wanted to make it feel like it was bigger than life.
Yes.
You know, if you're just in an arena and all of a sudden you got all your guys dressing back in the locker room and you bring that up, you think, okay, well, you've got 15, 20 guys in the locker room back there and they're coming out here and performing. It just becomes a show, you know. But if you've got guys that are flying private, whether they are or not, that's the perception you want to put out on television. And they got their own locker room, their own catering, their signs on their doors, all that kind of stuff. It makes it feel big. Vince was always about pretense and about how things looked. And that to him, just backstage area, given so many insider terms like that, it just made it appear small. And Vince was always about making it bigger.
Something that I think is smart too is it's on this list. Don't say fans. Whatever possible, refer to the audience as you.
Yep.
And in other situations, identify them. Raw fans, our fans, Cena's fans. I like that. Like that's a best practice right there, right?
100%. Vince hated the term mark, which obviously you would never use on television, but Vince hated that term. He would not use that term. You know, it's very, you know, William Regal is very much the same way. Amount of respect you have for people. Vince was a huge about respecting the fans, but he didn't want them called that. That's why he called them the WWE Universe. That's why that term came up, because Vince wanted to give them a special name because they were part of the show. They were part of us. It wasn't like, hey, here come our fans. They're going to pay a fee, and because of that, we're going to, you know, balance a ball on our nose and we're going to perform, or we're going to do whatever I want. But because they don't really do anything, Vince wanted the fans to feel like they were part of the show, which they were. When done right, fans are part of the show, and that's why he came up with the term WWE Universe.
He also prefers the term now available instead of on sale. Have you heard that one before?
Oh my God, yeah. I remember one time they sent an email out about something about, here's what you missed at WWE Network. Vince sent an email back, said, I don't give a fuck what I missed. And that was the whole email. That was it. But, you know, you're supposed to draw from the assumption that promote what we have. Don't promote what we don't have. And it's always available. There's never a negative anything. Vince is the ultimate salesman. I mean, all this stuff, you know, you could pick a word here or there. And why would he choose that as his battle? Most of this stuff makes perfect sense. You're Conrad, you're a terrific salesman. You built a whole company, on a couple different companies, on what you do. You've been successful in everything you've done. You understand how nomenclature matters.
Yes. I want to mention there's another post that was out there when they were getting ready to promote WrestleMania back in 2020, around the COVID era in the Tampa market. And this leaked out, and of course the Observer caught it and reported on it, that other local media who were involved in helping promote WrestleMania coming to town in Tampa in 2020. Here's the list of words that they didn't want. And some of this makes total sense. And Silva may actually have to bleep some of these on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, you maybe need to find the RSS because, well, YouTube doesn't like certain words. But here they go. You're not supposed to say blood, belt, strap, diva, headshot, trauma, kayfabe, mofos, house show, DQ, the anti-diva, spinal injuries, victim, violence, violent, wrestling, wrestlers, WWF, curb stomp, phrases including the word push, being over, babyface, heel, jobber, card. Some of that's just common sense, like duh. But other things that jump out, though, I can only imagine being a local newscaster in the Tampa market, and I'm here to promote the wrestling show, and they say, now listen, whatever you do when you're promoting World Wrestling Entertainment, you fucking better not say wrestling. Like that would be like, wait a minute, what? How am I going to do this? Now, I can almost work with everything else, but not calling them wrestlers, okay, I get that's a Vinceism, but the word wrestling being on the list is a real head scratcher to me, John.
Yeah, and that was something Vince always had a battle with. And, you know, we understand where it comes from. You know, it comes from the days when wrestling had such a bad name, and you want to give it something else. They created the term sports entertainment because of that. You know, this all makes sense when you know where it comes from. Does it make sense today? Probably not. And I would think it doesn't, because wrestling has a complete different connotation than what it had back in the 80s and the 90s. So Vince was left over from that because he was always trying to upgrade the product, always trying to make the product better. You know, going public, there was no reason to go public. We didn't have debt. We didn't need go out there and monetize shares for debt or anything, because we didn't. The company was to me always a vanity thing, And first he went public on the NASDAQ. A year later, he goes public on the NYSE. That's not coincidence. That was two different public events. Like, hey, this company is now trading on the stock exchange, and let's get two events out of it. Let's go to the NASDAQ first. Then let's decide in a year, let's go to the NYSE and get another big splash at the NYSE. It was all about perception to Vince, about taking wrestling from the old days into the new days and getting these massive TV contracts. During COVID, Vince called me and he goes, "I need an old voice on television." In fact, I was sitting right here on my couch when Vince McMahon with the other phone comes up. "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" Because right there, you think everybody's going to die in the world. You have no idea what's happening with COVID. You just think the whole world's about to end. We're about to be walking dead. We're going to be zombies. Walking around, biting people. And so the phone rang, and I said, "Oh, no." So I answered. I said, "This is the only phone call I would answer." And he goes, "Well, are you coming?" I go, "I am." I said, "Where are you?" He goes, "We're in Orlando. We got no audience. I need an old voice to be on commentary. Somebody that people recognize." So I said, "Okay, I'll be there." I remember flying down. There were like 5 people on the plane. There was nobody in the airport. And everybody was sitting like up front in first class. And I said, "I think I'm going to sit in the back." When there were like 15 seats on both sides of you, because you didn't know what was going to happen back then. You know if the whole world's going to die, or you're going to get it and die like everybody else you think is going to die. And there was nobody in the Orlando airport, nothing. And we're going down there trying to keep the company alive. I can tell you almost everybody in the company was against Vince running. Everybody was against it. I mean, everything, all the press was against it. Everything. This is horrible. How dare he do this? Now, when I got down there, Vince said, "Oh, it's just nothing but the flu." And he turned out to be pretty accurate about that, by the way. And I'm going to get into COVID, politics. But he said, "If I don't, I lose all my TV contracts." And it's what they're wanting to do, because they didn't know those TV contracts of live events became worth exponentially more. You thought they were going to be worth exponentially less is what you thought during COVID, because we didn't know if the world was ending or not. Everybody wanted out of those TV contracts. Well, the way Vince wouldn't violate it was by running shows without a crowd. And because he did that, and I cannot emphasize enough, everybody was against it. Because he did that, he got these billion-dollar TV contracts out of it. He saved the freaking company with that. It was unbelievable what he did by doing all that. And Vince, his entire life, has constantly been one step ahead of everything and everybody else in wrestling.
Listen, I'm smart enough to pick up what you're putting down there and read between the lines. You're talking about Fox, and it's come out that we know that Fox did not renew the WWE deal. Do you think that there was a chance that was Vince's concern, that hey, if these Fox people aren't thrilled and they see a way to get out of this contract, I got to make it really, really hard for them to do that?
They would have, and they would have. He said it straight up. He said it. If they have a chance to get out of these contracts, they're going to get out. He told me that when I got down there, because there was nobody there. It was me and Vince and Kevin and a few of the talent. Nobody wanted to come work, because everybody was scared of, the world ending, justifiably so. We'd never been through a pandemic.
Right.
So nobody knew what was going to happen. Vince thought he knew, and I think it turned out he was pretty accurate about it. But yeah, he said that. And almost exactly what you said. They'll get out of it if they can. I'm not going to let them. I'm not going to let them bankrupt my company by getting out of something and using a pandemic as an excuse. Not really an excuse. I get that. But he had a chance to run during it. And by doing that, they couldn't get out of the contracts. And he ended up getting these billion-dollar TV contracts out of it.
And by the way, go track the stock. I know that this is going to rub some people the wrong way. Vince was right. It worked out.
100%.
No doubt. So listen, there's some other inside terms, and then we'll move off of this banned list. You talked about we're trying to appeal to the masses, not the minority group. So little insider terms: heel, babyface, blown up, shoot, rib, mark, etc. Those are all off the list. Things like faction, don't say that. Say group. I think those are all kind of common sense, but is there another word like prick that you remember that just drove him up the wall?
He didn't like certain curse words, like GD. He didn't mind the F word. It was prick, and I think maybe asshole. I'm not sure about that. it was something strange about the word. That was the one Vince hated. There were just a few curse words that Vince didn't like. He didn't like you to curse unless he thought it was creative. He didn't like you to flip people off. He wouldn't have. I don't think he'd ever put up with what these guys are doing now, where every heel that walks out is flipping people off. Now it means zero. When Steve did it, it was groundbreaking. And now, Johnny Cash did it, it was groundbreaking. But now it's not groundbreaking. Everybody does it. So I think Vince would end up banning something like that now if he were around.
What about, I know there's been criticism from wrestling fans that sometimes, we would be not really hearing what's happening in the ring. So there'd be a great match happening in the ring, but the commentary is talking about the main event or what's happening on, what was it? Tout was the big social platform.
Yeah.
He was trying to, so they're hammering these sort of things and sort of ignoring what's going on in the ring. I know that was, Vince just trying to plug his stuff and be a salesman. I get that. But did he have a particular preference for when you've got a promo happening in the ring? Not action, but there's a wrestler talking about when you were supposed to speak or when you weren't?
Yeah. Now, as far as talent speaking, never interrupt them. Never interrupt them. Now, occasionally you could say something interspersed between their paragraphs.
Okay.
If it adds to it, sometimes Vince will even feed you something. But if a talent is saying something in the ring, man, that's the one thing. The only time maddest Vince ever got mad at me, and he never got very mad, they had a heavyweight boxer. I can't remember who it was. Maybe been Dante Wilder, maybe. And I can't remember. We're down in Alabama. I believe it was Alabama. I think he's from there. And man, I'm a big boxing fan. So I had all these notes and stuff on him. So I was putting him over. Well, he was talking to the camera, and Vince came on. That's, I think, one of the harshest he's ever been with me. And he says, John, you talked over the whole thing. Got just the whole thing. And I could tell he's so frustrated with me, and Vince, if the talent's in the ring and saying something to his opponent, saying something to the crowd that's interesting, or saying something in general, obviously not calling a spot, but saying something, lay out, 100% lay out completely. When you introduce, celebrities at ringside, lay out completely. If they're talking at all. Now, even if the conversation is just with the person next to them, you lay out. Vince was very good about that.
I wanted to know, you've said a minute ago that Vince, for whatever reason, would treat the former wrestlers, the retired wrestlers, much differently than he would the commentators. But do you have a story about Booker T that you can share with us about Booker T?
Now, first of all, I got to tell you, Vince is like me. He loves Booker. Everybody loves Booker. Booker is one of the best human beings ever walked on this planet, man. Look at that. How can you not love that guy? Booker is just one of the best guys. I'm so lucky in my career. When I started with Booker T, and we've been friends ever since. I wrote the foreword for one of his books, and I'm just lucky to have him as a friend. But Booker, Vince had given now this. I want to talk about Vince being crazy. Okay, so this leads up right up to this. People used to, when I went in 95, people go, "Oh, Vince is crazy." When I left in 2020, people go, "Oh, Vince is crazy." Vince isn't any crazier than he was. He does a million things and he compartmentalizes. Okay, and I'll get to that in a second about Vince compartmentalizing. I've never seen anything like it. Vince would go from one thing to the next, but he would completely change gears. I've seen Hunter do that too, by the way. It's a remarkable talent. Like you're sitting here talking to one person and you're all into it, and that person leaves and you sit here and another person comes in. You're no longer thinking about that. You're thinking about something else, and you're dealing with that issue at hand. It's a real rare trait at that level. Hunter's like that. Vince is like that. Maybe your great CEOs are like that, but those two guys are remarkable. But a lot of that with Vince was he would go from one thing to the next. He does that all day. So he didn't remember what he was at three compartments ago.
Right. So
that's a lot of the Vince would forget stuff to go, "Oh, he's crazy." No, he's not. He does more things in a day than most human beings do in 2 months. And he forgets stuff. So he had fed Booker a joke, some kind of, old joke, dad joke, and then apparently somebody called Vince and said, "Hey, did you hear the joke Booker said?" And Vince said, "No." Vince fed it to him. And they told him what Booker said, and Vince had Booker apologize for the joke.
And it was his own joke.
So Booker apologizes for the joke that Vince fed him. And when he came back, Vince didn't remember it. And, Vince wasn't mad about it. He was mad about it all. He goes, hey, Booker, you might ought to apologize for that joke that you said earlier. Well, Vince fed it to him. And Booker's like, this is a rib. You're ribbing me. This cannot be real. And so Booker apologized. I made a joke, a little inappropriate, whatever Booker said. And Vince goes, thanks, Booker, for taking care of that. Appreciate that. No big deal. Like Vince has forgiven him for saying what Vince told him to say. Booker came back, shook Vince's hand. Vince is all great with it, no problem. Vince, to this day, has no idea that he's the one that fed him the joke.
Has Vince ever, because I guess you should explain, because a lot of people don't really know what the announcer desk looks like. We know that you're watching a monitor, but I got questions on social media. Is the feed you're seeing on your monitor the exact same feed we're seeing at home?
100%, and that will never vary. Now, unless there's a technical glitch or something, because I need to call what you're watching. Yes. I don't need to call what I'm watching. So that's why Vince is adamant about watch the monitor. Now, you listen to football commentators at times, and they will say, I think the free safety was in a cover 2 coverage. That's why the post was open. They're obviously watching the field. That makes a big difference. That's a big difference because that helps the product. In wrestling, it's a show. Mm-hmm. I need to call exactly what you're seeing. I don't need to say, hey, off air, something happened, because that doesn't enhance the show. The viewer's like, well, why didn't you just show it? It's a work. And so we always had what was was in front of us was exactly what the fans were seeing, because Vince wanted us to call what the fans were seeing.
So let's talk about perhaps, what the rest of the desk looks like. We know that we've seen you guys have notes in the format, and you've got the different microphones on the desk, of course, and you've got your headsets, but there's usually like a little box and it has buttons on it. Can you explain to everybody listening to this what those buttons are and how that whole system works?
Yeah, and I never used hardly any of that. There was a cough button, obviously. The rest of the buttons were just volume buttons, and that was pretty much it. There wasn't a lot of extra buttons for me and Michael Cole or guests to deal with, because everything was controlled from the truck with Kevin. So we didn't need to control a lot of stuff. We didn't have a way, I don't believe, unless they've changed it, to talk directly to Vince. Now, Vince wanted to talk to us. He had the ability to talk only to us. And so did Kevin. And so did most of the other people that were, in positions of authority. Maybe Kerwin or Marty that were also in the truck, would have the ability to talk to us directly without, the whole company hearing it. And which is important sometimes, because sometimes things were kayfabe. But most of it is pretty basic stuff as far as what we had. Now there was what they call the God cam. That's the camera that Vince can see us.
Yes.
Obviously we can't see him, but it's not important that we see him. It's important that he sees us, in case something's wrong, in case there's a million reasons for Vince to see us. It's not just a matter of control and, hey, these guys are my puppets. I'm going to tell them what to say, what to do, and I'm going to watch them dance. That was not the reason.
So there wasn't a talkback button. You didn't have a button to talk to Vince at all.
No.
So you'd have to wait until you guys were in a break, and then you could just speak through your normal microphone and he would hear you.
Yeah. And, sometimes, I don't think we ever had to talk about it, but now I hope I'm not wrong on that. I don't think there ever was one. We certainly couldn't talk when we were live on television. Absolutely not.
I've just been able to hear from Tony Schiavone. Like, for instance, he's told the story as Goldberg is coming down the ramp on Nitro for the very first time in September of '97 in Salt Lake. They don't have a name for the guy, and they don't have a chyron for the guy. Now, he had heard that they were going to call him Bill Goldberg, and then he'd also heard they were going to call him Goldberg. And so there was never a real discussion about what you were going to call him. And so as he's coming down the ramp, Tony says he presses a button and asks the truck, what are we calling him, guys? What's his name? Give me something. But that's happening live on Nitro. Of course, it doesn't make the feed. We don't hear that. But you're saying the WWE setup that you used didn't have that.
I could be wrong. And I very well could be. I'm trying to remember if I remember pushing a button to try to talk to Vince and or the truck. We may have had a button that was available, but it wasn't available live. We did not have the accents. To my knowledge, about what I remember, to do something like Tony did and call the truck and say, "Hey, do we have a name for this guy?" Michael Cole may have.
I got you.
I don't
but
think
you didn't have to do that. I got you.
I did not. No.
Well, I know that there has to be some technical snafus before. Was there ever a time where, because from what I've heard, and I've never been on these headsets for WWE, so I don't know, but I imagine you're hearing other conversations happening too. There's lots of feeds that are going on because you even see the camera guys are wearing headsets so they can communicate and they can hear, hey, we're coming to you next or whatever as the action's going down. But there are other people involved, other people who've been around a long time, like a Kerwin Silfies.
You know how he got hired, right? You know how Kerwin got hired, right?
I do not.
So they're up in Allentown or wherever, they're from, up, northeastern, I guess, Pennsylvania. And they're running the TV show up there. And they went down to hire like a producer. Well, Kerwin happened to be wearing a suit. And they thought Kerwin was the one they came to hire. So they asked Kerwin. That's a great story. They asked Kerwin, said, hey, are you the one, either whatever? Kerwin goes, yes, I am. It's like the guy who got picked up at the airport of the commercial, like Dr. So-and-so, you end up in the limousine. He ended up in a limousine. He's been there for 30 years. He wasn't the guy they were supposed to hire. He just happened to be wearing a suit. And Kerwin has done a great job. Kerwin's a wonderful person. Kerwin's a terrific guy. Kerwin White with Chavo Guerrero was all a rib on Kerwin. That, just like Freddie Joe Floyd was a rib on Freddie Gerald Briscoe. Like people love Kerwin. Kerwin one time was where, oh my God, you gotta understand, we're children now. Okay. This is, people talk about how bad this was and this is bullying and all this stuff. We were children. Okay. We had fun back then and it's not appropriate now. I get it. We're in a different era. Kerwin's out there in a white seersucker suit and the divas are doing like some chocolate pudding bowl or something.
Oh,
we're sitting there in shock going, you're no way. Kerwin's walking near the chocolate pudding in a white suit. I mean, and of course, the last thing you do in a professional environment, you're not going to assault somebody and throw them in the chocolate pudding unless you're with us. If you're with us, that happens 10 times out of 10, maybe 11 out of 10. So we're sitting there just watching, and Kerwin, bless his heart, he knows better. He's a smart guy. He knows if he had thought about it, he would have never gotten near the pudding, much less wear this white suit. It wasn't long until Kerwin's in that fucking pudding. And this was before the show. This was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They just did it for the heck of it, just because it was a guy wears a white suit near a bunch of pudding. Of course you push him in. That's what you do. But anyway, to get to the point, Kerwin's I love Kerwin. By the way, Kerwin had like a heart attack or something at one point. He just got older. He had fallen asleep in a production meeting one time, and I text Vince and Kevin. I said, well, it's finally happened. And I just text them, and they're like in the front of the meeting, and I got a text from me, like, why would John text in the middle of the meeting? And Kerwin's asleep in his chair, like, yeah. And I said, so I said, it finally happened. And they both look at their text, and I sent them another text. Kerwin just died. And they're like, oh my God, damn Kerwin. So, that's what went on. Well, people understand this is what went on in production meetings. This was one of the most fun environments ever. I know people talk about how bad it was back then. It was a different environment. Okay, we grew up in a different way than people grow up now. I'm not saying it's better, worse, anything. I'm just telling you what it was. And so Kerwin I guess he was the director that day. Which, by the way, all these people that bash Kevin Dunn for the cuts that he does, he's the producer, not the director, right? The producer doesn't do the cuts. I mean, all these people go, oh, Kevin Dunn, we're so glad Kevin Dunn's got, really? Kevin Dunn built all this shit? Kevin took over for his dad, who had gone blind, and he took over and he worked with Vince McMahon Sr. Vince and Kevin, I just think the world of both these two guys, but I just laugh when I see all this stuff about, oh, Kevin Dunn's gone, so all these cuts aren't going to happen anymore. He's the producer. Producer doesn't do that at all. That's not his job. That's the director that does that, by the way. It drives me nuts. People want to bash these guys and have no idea what they're talking about. But Vince is on headset. I guess Kerwin is the director that day, I guess. Either Marty was gone or something. I don't know. Marty is a terrific human being. Great guy. Wonderful at what he does. He's still there, and he should be there. He'll be there forever, I hope, because Marty is, he is world class at what he does.
Big Eagles fan too, right?
Pardon me?
Big Eagles fan too, isn't he?
Massive Eagles fan. Yeah. He lives in Philadelphia. He always sent me pictures from Eagles games, different stuff. Marty Miller, he came over and saw me in Bermuda. A terrific man. I mean, Marty's one of the guys that you root for because he's such a good dude. But I guess Marty was out, so Kerwin was directing, or Kerwin was at least cutting to cameras or something. So Vince says in my ear, Kerwin, go to 5. And Vince a lot of times would produce stuff from the back if he saw something, that they needed changed. Now, he wouldn't produce, understand, this is what Vince did. Vince had like a million different minds. He would direct camera shots. He would direct commentator. He would direct talent. But it wasn't like he did all of it hands-on. It just like he'd interject something here or there. But he wanted to go to a different camera. So he said, Kerwin, camera 5. And of course, Kerwin didn't go to it because Vince is in my ear. Somehow the wires got crossed. He's in my ear. And Vince, a little bit more adamant, goes, Kerwin, go to 5. And Vince was still patient. Then finally, Vince gets a little madder and he goes, Kerwin, go to 5. And Kerwin doesn't go, of course, because Vince is in my ear. And so finally he goes, God damn it, Kerwin, you go into fucking business for yourself. Go to 5. now, I'm starting to laugh because I'm realizing he's going to kill Kerwin. Kerwin has no idea. And it gets worse. I mean, Vince is like Kerwin. It's like Kerwin has gone into business for himself and he's running the show. And Vince is trying to tell him what to do. And he's not listening to him, except the fact Vince is in my ear and Kerwin has not heard a word he said. And Vince is by this time threatened to fire him. Vince is threatened to kill him. He's like, Vince is going off in my ear. And I text him. I say, hey, boss, you're in my ear. And then Vince texts back, ha ha, good shit. That's what he texts back. I don't know if you can text in a baritone voice, but that's how I read it when I'm like, ha, good shit, ha.
Well, that's what Vince would say if he ever tried to fume. If you haven't tried to fume already, what are you waiting for? I'm a big believer in this because, well, we've all had a bad habit before. Maybe you need a little help breaking one of those bad habits. Fume can help. Maybe you've heard this flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking. It's a whole new movement towards better habits. And that is where Fume comes in. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. Flavored air isn't like vaping. Think of vapor as like sticky soda, but Fume cores are more like herbal teas. Fume has lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. And with flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. You see, Fume draws flavor to your mouth. Fume then fills that void of ditching a bad habit. You still have something to reach for. Fume is not a vape. There's no vapor, so you can use it anywhere. There's also no nicotine, so it's not addictive. And there's non-toxic flavors, so it's a guilt-free alternative. It's super easy, too, because there's no batteries, and you'll never need to charge it. It looks awesome. You can hold it in your hand and just feel the weighted, high-quality designs, and it really gives you something to fidget with. It makes these magnets and snaps and clicks. It's just going to help calm your anxiety. Fume is backed by doctors here in the United States, and they are continuously investing in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products. I'm a big believer in this. My wife has tried it. She was trying to kick a bad habit, and man, she loves the crisp mint, and the orange vanilla are her 2 favorites. I'm a big believer in this, and that's why I'm proud to say that Fume has served more than 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story. For a limited time, just use our code WRESTLE, and you get a free gift with your journey pack. Head on over to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use our code WRESTLE, or just scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, and you'll get a free gift with your order today. Let's talk about some of the other moments that we've had in commentary with our pal, good old JR. A good friend of mine and yours, and I know he's an Oklahoma man and you're a Texas man, but I've heard through the grapevine that, boy, Vince loved messing with him, and maybe he kept doing it because JR would sell. And when JR would sell, it just motivated Vince to do more. And at times, man, from the outside looking in, it looked kind of downright mean-spirited. But I'm sure it came from a place of we're all children and we're busting balls and all that sort of thing with Vince. Do you have any fun Vince JR stories you can share with us?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make excuses for it. When I say we're all children, that's what we were. We were just fun. It was a different generation, okay? And was it wrong? Yes. If it was, you think it's wrong, it's wrong. I'm not trying to justify anything we did or didn't do, or Vince did, or anything that happened, or the generation itself. That shit just happened. Guys loved to rib back then. And also, one thing Vince hated was boredom. Vince hated boredom. So when you look at shows like during, like say lead up to WrestleMania, like they have right now, this is going to be some really cool, fun times. People, celebrities want to come in. This is an incredible time of the year. Well, get around May, June, when you don't have anything and SummerSlam's still a ways away, or get around September when SummerSlam's over and you don't have anything till Survivor Series, and Survivor Series had lost its prestige as one of the big four, so it didn't matter like SummerSlam and WrestleMania did anymore, or Royal Rumble. That's when Vince got bored. And Vince loved to stir things up. He hated when guys would sit out there and just call the match and everything hunky-dory. He loved to stir guys up. Vince, by the way, did the same thing to me. When he'd have guests, wrestlers out there, especially ones that weren't very glib, that weren't used to talking, Vince would feed them line after line. And I know they came from Vince because they were way too freaking creative and inside to me, because this person didn't know me very well. Vince loved to stir me up. He thought it made the product better because it got me motivated to do something. Now, I don't know if that was what happened with JR. Maybe he just like stirred up JR. But my God, the ribs on JR. I mean, now we'll get to one of the greatest moments in the history of wrestling when he punched Big Dick Johnson in the balls, which to this day could be the greatest thing that happened in the history of wrestling. In the history, that man idolizes John Wayne. JR was John Wayne that day. I mean, I'll just go straight to it. So Big Dick Johnson, was the writer, who did kind of the Chris Farley type gimmick. Very creative guy, wonderful guy, really, really smart guy. Vince really liked him, but he'd go out there, in his thong, diaper, whatever it was, and he'd do the dance and all this stuff. Well, at the end of the show, he's going to get up on the table. We're off air at this point. It's all filmed. It's on the internet somewhere. You can look it up where JR did it, and you can see all the things I'm telling you about. And he's squirting baby oil in the air, and he's getting it all over JR, which is what he's supposed to do because Vince told him to do that. Again, okay. It's just a rib. It's a rib on JR. Is it unprofessional? Yes. Did we find it funny? Yes. We did. Okay. Sue us over, hate us over, whatever you want to do. So anyway, he's doing all this shit to JR, and JR gets up and he turns to King. He goes, "What's the over under? I punch him in the balls." And King goes, "You won't do that." JR turns and freaking Joe Frazier right hooks Big Nick right in the balls. I mean, socked him right in the nutsack. In front of 15,000 people. He sat there, this big guy looked like kind of like Chris Farley. This was kind of the character he played. Grabs his balls, falls over, hits the table, and rolls the oil to the floor. And JR walked off like John Wayne. It was one of the coolest things to this day I've ever seen. It was so fucking. We popped so big backstage for JR to do that. It was tremendous. It was JR finally had enough, or he was just being, JR was having fun too. Is that fun to punch a guy in the balls? Apparently it is, because we thought it was entertaining as hell.
You've probably seen some of the things that Vince would do to rile up JR. Have you ever seen him?
I was there for a lot of them.
Well, give us a few here.
Oh my God, what were you going to say? I'll take off.
No, listen, we talked earlier about the whole transition from JR to Michael Cole. And how the internet really jumped on that. Yeah. I wasn't there. I don't know. But I got to think that Vince had fun with that too.
Oh, my God. Vince loved writing that stuff for Michael Cole. Those pictures of Michael Cole when he's in that little box where King can't get him and where Cole is like the greatest athlete in Syracuse history, which, by the way, had Jim Brown at it. I put that out almost every year. Michael Cole's the greatest athlete in Syracuse history. And Michael always reminds me that, Jim Brown was there. I said, yeah, you're a lot better than him. But the stuff Michael did, again, we are so sad Michael wasn't 6'3", 265 pounds. He'd have headlined 18 wrestlers. He was one of the best heels WWE ever had. He was so freaking talented. And Vince loved writing for him, especially for JR. The rap battle was one of the greatest of all time. And, JR forgot his lines, and he turned to Cole, and he said, "Hey, help me out my lines here." And Cole goes, "Nope." And just left him hanging. I mean, it's just one of those ribs. Like, that was pretty clever. But I'll tell you one time we had it was always back in the day. What time frame that is? Back in the day, as they say, Michael and I were doing commentary for, I guess, SmackDown, I believe, and JR and King were doing it for Raw. And so we'd have all of the announce tables set up. And I think even ECW was there with Taz, I think, maybe Enjoy. I'm not sure. Anyway, but I know we were there for sure with them because of what happened. So Vince gets on my headset and he goes, Big John, I'm just talking to you. And so now I know something is important, but I know it has nothing to do with wrestling. I can tell by the way he's talking. This is going to be some good shit. This is going to be fun. Whatever happens next, I'm really going to enjoy because this is going to be great. You know, it just had that different, you know, voice when he was wanting to rib people. And so, so I'm sitting there listening. He's only talking to me. And he goes, JR has something on his face. I'm going to give him an on camera after the next match. He goes, get him. And I'm like, what? Well, now I have no idea. No idea what's happened. So I'm trying to look down the aisle and see what JR has on his face. And he has like a shave mark where he cut himself or something on his face, like a cheek or neck or something like that right on his face where I could see it because it was on my side. Thank God. And thank God Oklahoma had just lost the football game. So now imagine this. You want to talk about, you guys want to talk about unprofessional? Vince gives him, or fun, however you want to define it. I define it as fun. Vince gives him a on camera after the thing goes, baby, we're going to go on camera, throw to this. Well, my microphone's not supposed to be live. Okay. Because you can talk or do something. You're not going to end up on the thing, or there might be fans behind me saying something. My camera was not live unless I'm doing commentary. And then it's, you know, right next to my mouth where you're not going to catch all of the ambient noise around you. So they go to this on camera, which is total ad lib. They get JR on camera and they get almost a close up of this, this cut on his face that he shaved himself or something with. And he goes, John, get him. And that's all the instructions. So I yelled out, I go, hey, JR. And JR's trying to ignore me because my microphone's not supposed to be live. And so I said it again. I go, hey, JR. Like old Black Bart. Hey, JR. No, and JR finally just kind of like looks. I said, what happened? Oklahoma losing, you try to slit your throat and miss? And brother, Vince went ballistic. He goes, that's good. Well, JR is so taken aback by me doing this.
Yes.
That he looks at me and turns into a 7-year-old, which is completely understandable, and says, your mama. That's what he said back to me, was your mama. So, I'm sitting there. I'm going, I've got him beyond belief now. And this is unbelievable. And Vince gets mad. He goes, that class is, he said something about your mother.
Oh, God damn.
Like, I deserve this. What are you talking about? And so anyway, they go to something else. And Vince is like still in my ear, goes, he shouldn't have said something about your mother. Going, no, we shouldn't have interrupted his live on camera is what we shouldn't have done. So I get to the back afterwards and Laurinaitis is back there and he's wanting to make something of it. And he says, hey man, I just want to say something. You know, JR saying something about your mother like that. I said, Johnny, I fucking deserve that. I said, he should have said a lot worse than that. I said, it sabotaged his own camera. I said, of course he said something about my mother. I said, I deserve all that. And Johnny's like, well, I don't know about that. I said, I do. Just leave it alone.
My God.
Yeah.
Did Vince ever play into the Michael Cole JR stuff in terms of, you know, like you started this by giving Michael Cole some props, and I know he's your buddy, and I get that. But JR, I mean, he is the voice of professional wrestling. He's got that trademarked.
Oh, 100%. And he was the voice. He was the voice of the best era. You know, you can argue this era might be better. I don't know that or not. That's, you know, subjective. But the best era until this era, for sure, the best era of wrestling, JR was the voice. I mean, JR's a GOAT, man. He's a Mount Rushmore. You know, he's on Mount Rushmore of commentators. I mean, JR is the guy. You know, it's just I think Michael Cole is on Mount Rushmore too, and I like working with Michael better because I worked with Michael for years. So you know that's my choice. But JR's the GOAT, man. I think him and Michael Cole are the two best of all time. Then you put in Gordon Soley. I mean, that's about as big a compliment as I could possibly give him. But Vince loved messing with JR. So we're in Boston one time, and I think they're both calling the show at the same time. As maybe when King was out for a while when he had the heart attack or something. I'm not sure I can't remember what it was. We're traveling with me, Marty Miller, JR, and Michael Cole, and we got to go down to Hartford. And Vince calls in JR, and he's just ribbing him. He says, "Hey, Michael, I just want to tell you," in front of JR, he goes, "You're the best commentator I've ever seen in my life. You're so good. God, everything you do is just excellent, just excellent." And all he does is tell Michael he's basically the second coming. That next to a Messiah, that Michael's the most important person that's ever been on the planet. Is what Vince is telling him. And all he's doing is he knows we got to ride with JR down to Hartford just to stir him up for us to get in the car with him. No, we're getting in the car, and JR, sitting there and having a cigarette down the road. It's cold as it can be. We're having our drinks, our beverages, and finally JR goes, "What was all that with the old man back there?" I said, "Wow, he loves you, Michael. He thinks you're the best." And Michael's like, "Please, just shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up."
I love it so much.
JR is the best. I love JR. He's done so much for me. I love the man, but he got worked up so much, especially by Vince. I don't know if he wanted Vince to approve. I have no idea the dynamic of it, but Vince could get to him more times. We're in a show one time, and I think we're in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm not 100% sure. Who knows where it was? Could have been Mars. We're somewhere, and I'm on the headset with JR. And Vince is feeding me lines, to mess with him, during the show. And Vince goes, "You almost got him." I'm like, we're the go home show. This is what Vince is interested in. So finally, JR had enough, and he looks over at me and he goes, "Big mouth Bradshaw, big mouth Bradshaw, big mouth Bradshaw." And he says, that's what he says. That's his response. And Vince goes, "You got him. Don't let him off the hook." I'm like, holy shit.
God.
Leave this man alone. And JR used to ask me, he goes, "Hey, is the old man feeding you that?" I said, "JR, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you. I said it. I take responsibility." He goes, "Yeah, I know it's him. I know it's him. I said, "Well, if you know it's him, you don't have to ask. You know it's him." But a lot of that, Conrad, you talk about, us being children, and we were, and you talk about different generations, we were, but it's also Vince loved when guys would get agitated and do something different on the show. He hated normals. He hated normal. Anything that was normal, just going along, Vince thought it was the worst thing he could possibly do. He wanted something happening all the time. And if that was just stirring up something with JR or Cole, Vince did it. And you can't argue with Vince's success. People say, "Oh, Vince was this or that." Vince was a very successful guy. And I don't know if this was ribbing JR as much as it was he's getting some action on the commentary. And a lot of us, if he's going to entertain himself, a lot of times if you're entertained, so are the fans. And I think that's the way Vince looked at it a lot of times.
Do you think there's ever been a time where, because you told us the line or the joke that Booker T had been fed by Vince and it didn't land, and then Booker had to apologize, even though it was Vince's words.
Yeah.
Do you think you ever saw anything like that with a wrestler, where a wrestler goes out and does exactly what Vince says, the fans shit on it, it dies, and then Vince is in your ear convincing you to shit on the talent? I mean, does something like that happen?
A couple of times. He wrote something for Jericho one time, and Jericho's one of the most entertaining guys in the history of the business. I love Chris. To this day, I think Chris's gimmick right now is fantastic. I mean, people chanting for him to retire and him telling you he's the learning tree. I mean, Chris is constantly reinventing himself. I love Chris. I have a huge admiration for Chris. But he wrote "Suffering Succotash" or whatever it was for fucking Roman Reigns one time.
Yes.
That's the worst shit I ever heard. I mean, you really want him to say that? And nobody got that. He'd written something for Chris, and it didn't work. And Vince right away is in my ear. It's the opening segment of Raw. And Vince says, "This is the worst thing I ever put on television." And I just kind of laughed. And he goes, "Say it." I go, "You're got to be kidding me." I said, "This is the worst thing I've ever seen on television." And Michael Cole looks at me like, "What are you doing?" And then he realized, of course, that Vince is saying it. But Vince, exactly. And I felt so bad because I love Chris. But Chris had given some lines or something. Chris, by the way, people don't take this out of context, and I hate that. Chris did 100 different segments. This was the one and only part of it that was awful because it was written bad.
Yeah.
And then Vince bashed the writing. He didn't bash how Chris said it. He bashed what was said. Vince wrote it. Like, you got to be kidding me. Hey, I'll tell you another thing about Michael Cole. Cole was Cole's a stand-up dude, by the way. I mean, 100% stand-up dude. He's a man. I love Michael. And I love him for this reason, because you never have to worry about where his feet are. I mean, they're going to be right beside you no matter what. But Vince would feed me stuff sometimes that was wrong. Now, again, it's his sandbox. Okay, I'm not a real commentator. He would say this is the first time this man won the Intercontinental Championship. I know it's not. I don't have a way to tell Vince that this guy's won it 10 years ago. This is the second time he's won it. I don't have a way to tell him that. Vince wants this said. So I would just say it. And people would, bash me for that. How can you say that? Don't you know better than that? You don't understand the dynamic. It's not worth the fight. Well, Michael Cole invariably would say, "Why'd you say that? That's dumb." I'm like, "You motherfucker." Because Vince knows Michael's taking a shot at him. So Vince would get in my ear, "That little mealy mouth from Syracuse, God, he wants to fuck with me." I'm like, "Oh, no.
My God.
Why did you do this?" Michael would do that. It was so funny because Vince would say something that either Michael thought didn't make sense or was not factual. Michael would call me on it every single time, knowing it's poking the bear.
Yes.
Well, now all Vince is interested is he's going to get Michael back by the end of the show. And I'm just the conduit. I'm like, "You got to be, would you please leave that man alone? Quit saying this." Michael thought it was the funniest thing ever. Michael's told the story before. Michael got chewed out one time about something. He got chewed out a lot, by the way. Like I say, he treated us differently. And, he wanted Michael to have this level of perfection, which, by the way, there's been other play-by-play guys that came in that Vince, I was there, did not treat like that. He treated Michael really harshly. And I think it's because two things. He liked Michael and he knew how talented Michael was. But he was tough on him. I mean, really tough on him. And one time he had really chewed him out. Michael walks in the grill and he has his finger out of his holster and he's pointing at Vince and he's telling him he is a professional. "Don't you ever say that shit to me again. I will walk out of here." And he reads Vince McMahon the freaking riot act in front of everybody, which is something you don't do. If you get Vince alone in his room and you read the riot act to him, he has no issue with that. If you do it in front of people, that man bows up. That's something you don't do. And Vince was sitting there just looking at me. It was such a departure from normal Michael. He cuts this promo you wouldn't believe on Vince, and he storms out. And I'm right behind Michael. And Vince looks up at me and goes, "What's he hot about?" I go, "I don't know. I guess he had a bad night." And Vince goes, "God damn, fuck."
My God. Listen, I know that some people are going to hear what you just laid out about Vince being hard on certain announcers, and it's not going to resonate with them. But if you've played sports, and I know that some people are going to be annoyed with this, man, I had a football coach. That's how he motivated people. He would stay in your ass. And by the way, he did that with his best players. He didn't do that with the kids who didn't have an opportunity. He would push them to be better and to make their, performance better. He wanted to bring out the best in them. Do you think that's where Vince's stuff came from? Or is it just Vince is a maniacal asshole, or a combination of both?
I don't think he's a maniacal asshole. I love him. I really do. I just, I think, and I love my old football coach. I had a football coach in Sweetwater High School, W.T. Stapler, who's in the Hall of Fame in Texas high school football. He called me every name you could ever call me. I mean, he called me a pussy. When you're a 16-year-old kid getting called that by a grown man, it's demoralizing, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. They believed, old coaches like you had, believed in the military, system where you break kids down because you want to know where they are when you go into battle. I understand football is not battle like you go into military battle, but that's how they would associate it with. And so you got treated differently. I remember we had, 110 degrees down in practice down in Texas one day. I remember thinking I was baking. A little PVC pipe with a little bit of water hose plucked out of them with the garden hose. You're able to get a 2-minute drink during practice in 3 hours, because they thought it made you tough. It's just a different mindset. And Vince grew up in a military school. I think he got kicked out, but he grew up in a tough environment. He grew up with a stepdad who was not good to him. And he grew up in a tough environment of that old school training. And that's how he treated most of the guys. Now, if you asked me during that time where Vince reamed me the most, did he love me? And I'd say, yeah, absolutely. I had no problem with that. Most of the guys didn't. That's changed. That was generational. What's changed now, and it may be better now. It may be 100% better now. I wouldn't change my generation for the world of what it was, but that was just Vince being a tough old guy trying to get a product better. And for the most part, Michael understood that. Michael went off on that one day, and Vince, to his credit, swallowed it, learned from it, and treated Michael differently from that point going forward. He still would yell at him and still call him names, but that's the way guys talked back then. Gerald Briscoe went and did something with NXT not too long ago, and he said, "Hey man, you're hitting their ropes," and he used a pretty tough term. They said, "You can't say that anymore." He goes, "It offends people." And Gerald's like, "What? I can't do that?" It's just a different mindset. And I'm not saying that ours was right. I'm giving you the rationale behind why we did this, not explaining or trying to say what we did was okay. Not you judge that for yourself. I'm just telling you what went on in that generation. And that to me is where Vince McMahon came from.
I never know. You always send me an email before we click record, and it's just a list of words as like memory joggers for you. And you have Jimmy Snuka's son down here. What the hell is that about?
Oh,
Jimmy Snuka's son.
It's one of the greatest stories in the history of the world. So we used to get, you'll judge the story. Vince, I used to love when guys would go up to Vince. I see it all the time. "Vince, I got a great idea for you." And Vince would invariably say, "I'll be the judge of that." Okay. I'll tell you, I got this great story. You'll be the judge of that. To me, it's a great story. You may think it sucks. I don't have no idea. And your fans may think it sucks and want Bruce back, which everybody does because I'm not very good. But we're down, I think in Alabama. I remember the kind of the dressing room. But I could have been on Mars. Who knows? Everything blurs together. And Vince is going over this scene with us. Back when he used to commentary just with me and us and him, which is so cool. Because you knew exactly what the guy who owned the company wanted. There was no doubt about it. There's no ambiguity about it. You knew exactly what Vince wanted when he told you what he wanted from commentary. And we would go over characters about how to build commentary. It was really cool system to do things, a great learning system. And so he says, "Hey, when this tags in, be sure and say Jimmy Snuka's son tags in." And so Michael, which by the way, the first time I ever did commentary, I go down with JR, and JR had copious notes. He's a real professional. JR is, he's just like Michael. He'd take all kinds of notes. King is sitting there drawing some woman on the front row. That's when I realized that's how color commentators do their job. They've told Shaq and Chuck, just show up for the NBA show.
Yes.
Just show up. Be you. Color commentators need to just be them. That doesn't mean don't do your research, but you don't need the notes like the play-by-play guy is the one that's got to set the table. So we're sitting back there, and Michael's taking notes. Be sure and say it's Jimmy Snuka's son. Vince goes on to say, they later tried that, but at first they didn't want to try it for good reason because, it's hard to live up to the idea of Jimmy Snuka. And he goes, "God, Jimmy tried to get me to do that. I can't do that, man. How do you live up to being Jimmy Snuka? You might eventually, but not your debut. You can't say it's Jimmy Snuka's son. Whatever you do, don't ever say it's Jimmy Snuka's son." That's what Vince goes on to specifically say. Do not say it's Jimmy Snuka's son. This is after he had made the joke. Be sure and say it's Jimmy Snuka's son. Well, Michael Cole's been writing this whole time. So we get out there. I think nothing of it. Michael's got all his notes as he always does. The kid tags in, and Michael Cole says, "In comes Jimmy Snuka's son." Exactly 100% what Vince McMahon told him not to say. Yes. 100%. And when he says it, I start laughing because I realize Michael doesn't know what he said. That, Michael would never do something like that on purpose. Well, Vince now, in his mind, I can't read his mind, but this is what I get from what he said next, is thinking, this Michael Cole has chose this time to get me in front of a company I bought from my father, in front of everybody around in this world that I know, to fuck with me in front of everybody. That you could tell that's what Vince is thinking, because Vince blew a gasket. He says, "Michael," because he looks on the thing, he sees me laughing, and he sees Michael directly disobey him in front of the entire world. And that's what Vince has in his mind, is they disobeyed him. Michael did not, of course, because he didn't know. He sees me laughing. He thinks that I'm laughing at Michael messing with him. You don't mess with Vince in front of people. You can rib him all you want, but if you do it in public, there's going to be a fight. So Vince goes, "Michael, you fucking fuckity fuck asshole." And then Michael is so taken aback. He just like what the hell was that? And I started laughing more because now I realize Vince has lost it. Michael doesn't know what's going on. I'm the only one that's in on everything. You know, I know everything going on in every room. They only know what's going on in their rooms. And Michael's beside himself. He doesn't know what's happening. Vince is beside himself because he thinks Michael has chosen this time to try to embarrass him in front of his entire company. And Vince goes crazy. And he says, Michael, I already kick your ass. No, I already fire you. No, I already fire you, then kick your ass. Now he's negotiating with himself about what order he's going to do things to Michael. And I'm starting to, I can't quit laughing. I literally, the whole thing is so funny. And then all of a sudden I realize, oh my, wait a minute, Vince, he may come out here. And I'm starting to think this has gotten too serious. And now I'm like starting to panic because I'm the only one that knows what's going on. I'm the one that's got to stop Vince. Now, Michael Cole is no shrinking violet. He's going to fight. Whether he wins or not, Michael's going to fight. But what would happen if that happened? What happens if Vince McMahon walks out? The place is going to go ballistic popping. Well, Vince is going to head straight for Michael. And they're going to end up rolling around the ground fighting. That's what I think is going to happen. And I'm like, oh, my God, this is a disaster. What do I do? Michael has no idea what's happened. Vince is beside himself because he thinks Michael is best with him in front of his own company. And all of a sudden, it goes radio silence. And I'm like, oh, my God, he's coming out here. He's coming out here. And I'm like, what do I do? Do I stop him in the aisle? What do I break it up? What do I do? Because nobody in the building except for me knows what's going on between these two. And if something happens, either he fires him on the spot, something happens physically, I'm the only one that knows. And so I'm like, what the hell do I do? And then finally, about 20 seconds later, or it what seemed like 20 minutes, whatever it was, Vince comes back on and he goes, I guess Kevin Dunn had smartened him up or something. Vince goes, ha ha, guess I overreacted. Ha ha ha, carry on. And Vince thought it was funny.
My gosh.
Yeah. And then Michael Cole still has no idea what's happened. So during commercial, I've got to tell Michael what happened. And Michael's like, you're kidding me. I go, no. I said, Michael, I think he was coming out here. And Michael goes, I think he was.
Do you have another note you have here? Titus? What happened with Titus? Did Titus and Michael Cole? What's going on?
Oh, yeah. Titus comes out, and what he's going to do, they rib Michael incessantly. They rib me, too. I remember one time somebody was juice bleeding or something. Vince had them throw him into me behind the desk. Got a new suit on. So, of course, you get it bloody. You know, again, we're children. I get that, all right? And so Titus was going to come out and throw up either in my hat or on Michael, and then put the hat on Michael, I think was what it was.
Oh, okay.
So Titus was going to come out. For some reason, he was going to get sick to his stomach, according to storyline, but they're just a rib on Michael. And so Titus, they gave him this stuff to drink. Well, what he's supposed to do was drink it and spew it out. It was like peas and all kinds of brown liquid and stuff. Well, Titus thought you were supposed to drink it and then throw up. He misunderstood from one of the instructions. So Titus drinks it and makes himself throw up. He throws up on Michael Cole. He threw up on Michael. And then he threw up in the hat and he put it on Michael. And Michael's out there with puke on him. And so Titus just made a mistake. Somebody didn't explain it to him what was supposed to happen. And so Michael's like out there going, I got fucking puke on me. I'm in the middle of like a worldwide television show.
Yes.
Covered in puke, legitimate puke. And so Michael gets on. He goes, I feel like I'm back at my college frat party. And Vince goes, damn, don't bring it up. And so Michael goes into commercial. And Vince goes, don't bring it up. He goes, Vince, you had a guy puke on me. What do you mean don't bring it up?
Yeah. Don't bring it up.
Don't bring it up. You're covered in puke and you got a cowboy hat on you with puke all over you. And don't bring it up.
There's another note here. Mexicools. Do you have a Mexicool story?
Oh, my God, this is great. So, Michael and his lovely wife, Yoli, have been to Bermuda to visit me a couple times. And Michael, we're good friends, and Yoli's a wonderful human being. Well, they had a place down on the Texas-Mexican border. I can't remember if it was McAllen or where it was. They're now more in, I won't say where, but further up north. And Michael would tell me, that she's a Mexican-American, that, her relatives all come in. Most of them spoke Spanish while they were there. And Michael would joke about the fact that, he can't understand what his own relatives are saying, And so we had the Mexicools come out. We had just talked about this, me and Michael, off air. And so anyway, so we're sitting there and I said, Mexicools come out. I said, Michael, looks like your house at Thanksgiving. And I started laughing. And Michael, he's so smart. He threw me under the bus. He goes, "What do you mean by that?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, I can't say nothing. I sound like a freaking racist now." I'm like, what do I say? And I'm like, "Can we go to commercial?" I had no idea what to say.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, I'll tell you a good one about Evander Holyfield, which Matt Hardy has told several times. So we were in Houston one time. We met Evander, and I'm a huge boxing fan. I love Evander Holyfield. This, probably I'll never want to talk to me, but we see him, and he kind of blows off me and Ron. And I thought that was kind of bullshit. He knows who Ron is. He may not know who I am, but it kind of didn't sit well with me. So anyway, fast forward a few months, my wife meets him at Fox, and she goes, "Hey, I just met a boxer here. Who is this?" And I said, she told me, I said, "Well, Evander Holyfield." I said, "One of the greatest boxers of all time. He's tremendous, incredible fighter." And she said, "Well, he's very nice." I said, "Yeah, he's had 9 women by 9 different children." Of course, he's being nice to you. Get away from him. It was a joke. And so anyway, fast forward to Madison Square Garden, where Matt Hardy has to have this boxing match with Evander Holyfield. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, I don't care what you're doing. It's like being in the octagon with Shamrock. What are you going to do? You can't do anything. You're at his mercy. I mean, here's the guy who knocked out Tyson. Yeah. Got boxing gloves on in Madison Square Garden. So anyway, we're putting him over like he's God. Deservedly so. He's a great boxer. Huge fan of his. Well, anyway, during the commercial break, Michael tells me, he goes, "Yeah, so anyway, your wife had a good run-in with him." And I started laughing. I'm telling Michael the story. I said, "Yeah, it's driving me nuts." And I tell the joke about that. I said, "Yeah, he's 9 children by 9 different women. Stay away from him." And, and I'm like, I thought he was a dick when he met me and Ron. Anyway, I'm telling Cole this. I hear that baritone voice. He goes, "Who's talking?" And I said, "Vince, I'm talking. It's me. I mean, you recognize my voice." And he goes, "It's going into his dressing room." And I said, first of all, like, why would it go in his dressing room? And so during commercial, when I'm telling Michael all this stuff about Evander, MVP and Matt Hardy are sitting there talking to Evander, who's got his kid with him, what they said, on his lap. And all of a sudden, Evander just shuts down. I mean, just shuts down. Like, you got to be like, somebody on this show is saying this about me, which I am. I was horribly inappropriate.
He really did hear it in the locker room, in his room.
He heard every bit of it.
Oh, my.
Plain as day. It was in his locker room. Plain as day. And so all of a sudden he tells Matt and MVP, from what they tell me, and I could have the story a little bit wrong because I'm, repeating, from years later. I'll talk to you later. And so they're thrown out. Well, now all of a sudden Matt realizes he's going to be in boxing gloves with the guy who knocked out Mike Tyson, one of the greatest fighters of all time, in Madison Square Garden with a guy that's pissed off because of me. And Vince is like, "God damn, John, why would you, God, John, you got to be careful. Got to assume the microphone's live," which I do. I was very unprofessional. So anyway, they do the match. Evander does exactly like he's supposed to do. No, nothing. I think Matt probably sweat the whole thing. Like, at some point, this guy might kill me, which didn't matter who it was. It was Evander Holyfield. He was going to kill whoever was in front of him in Madison Square Garden with boxing gloves on. And so I come to the back at the end, and Vince pulls me aside, and he goes, so anyway, well, first, I come back from the match. I go to Evander's locker room. I thought, I'm going to take, whatever happens, happens. I was wrong. I'm going to tell him I'm sorry for being unprofessional. So I go to his locker room, and his bodyguard was there, or whoever it was, maybe a family member, I don't know, a big guy. And I said, "Hey, I want to talk to Evander. I'm the one that said this, and I just want to let him know that." And he was sitting right behind him, like 2 feet. He can hear everything I'm saying. So when I'm talking to the guy, I'm really talking to him. So I want to let him know that WWE had nothing to do with this, that I said it. And I said it was a personal issue I had because we met him in Houston, and I didn't like the interaction, but it was very unprofessional of me. I just want to say I'm sorry that he was a guest of ours. I owe him better than that. And I just want to say I'm sorry. And I was wanting to go in and, again, whatever happened. Hopefully he'd shake my hand. He punched me. I may not, wouldn't be around, wouldn't be awake for a while, but whatever happened was going to happen. I remember going into his room, Ron goes, "Leg dive him," just kidding. Which, that's my only chance, which isn't much. But anyway, the guy turned around. He's like 2 feet behind him. He heard everything I said. And he looked at Vander, and Vander shook his head. No, he didn't want to talk to me. Okay, that's fine. I was a dick and shouldn't have said it. It was deserved, by the way, but I shouldn't have said it. Not as when he was a guest of ours. That was the part that was unprofessional. The problem I had with him was different, but shouldn't have done that when he was a guest of ours. Should have assumed the microphone was live. So the next day I walk into Vince's office and he says, John, you got to be careful. You can't assume that a microphone is dead, that you're just talking to Michael. He goes, we almost lost Evander. I said, Vince, we almost lost Matt. Vince goes, you're right. God almighty. Oh, man.
What a great story.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about something that you and I have never really talked about on the show before, but I do see people talk about it online for whatever reason. It's one of these things that's sort of taken a life of its own, but it's about Marrow Ranallo. And I know that he didn't always have the best experience with WWE. He, of course, has been a fabulous broadcaster for big time boxing events, and we've heard him on some different wrestling events. But there's your name gets thrown in the hat a lot. And I, learning and listening today, feel like a lot of that may not have actually been you. Do you want to set the record straight on anything, Marrow, or is that old news at this point?
It's old news, but I don't mind talking about it. I've done it a million times. I have no problem with Marrow, and I'm certainly not going to throw anybody under the bus. Whatever I've said on air, I've said. And what happened was the only thing I had over Marrow as far as him getting hired, they sent me a clip of Marrow before he got hired. And of course, you're going to have your best clip, when you send in. And Michael Cole asked me, he goes, what do you think? And I said, he's obviously, got a terrific vocabulary, got a great voice. You love that baritone voice, that deep voice, just like Brad Nessler and, these other guys, it's just a better voice. It was that radio voice. And I said, sound fine. And he goes, okay, you're going to be working with him. I said, okay, fine. Well, then what ended up happening was, traffic is tough. And I had no further input into Marrow's career after that, period. So they told me later they're going to put Tom Phillips out there to do traffic for Marrow, which.
Explain what traffic is for some of our listeners.
Traffic is going in and out of breaks. Traffic is reading all the graphics. Traffic's hard. It's not like, say, football or basketball or boxing or MMA, because you don't go from, say, one event to a complete non sequitur to a complete different event. In football, if a guy gets hurt, you stop the play, you stop the game, and you come back after commercial break to the game where the guy had just gotten hurt. That happens in wrestling. You may go from a men's championship match to a women's championship match, some type of backstage segment or something, completely non sequitur. And so to get there, you got to have a ton of traffic. And plus you're pushing a million things. In football, you're just pushing the game next week. In football, you're pushing maybe the Super Bowl coming up. But in wrestling, you're pushing your social media, you're pushing your DVDs, you're pushing your video games, you're pushing your live events, you're pushing a million different things and a million different shows. Traffic is brutal. Very few people in the history of business can handle all that traffic. And I don't know if Marrow could or not, because I wasn't in on Tom Phillips coming out there. They just told me. They didn't ask me. They said, Tom's going to come out and do the traffic, so Marrow can just concentrate on commentary. I said, okay, that's fine. So anyway, Tom's out there now. So now there's four of us out there. I believe it's four of us. I think it was. Four of us or three of us, whatever it was. So I said, okay, it's fine. And then Marrow had a travel problem around WrestleMania. And there was a show that we did called Bring It to the Table that was, kind of tongue-in-cheek type show. And there was a poll in that show, and this fits into the whole thing with Marrow, was that Marrow was the best announcer in the world or something like that.
Oh, it was on The Observer. I remember that because I was shocked you guys showed The Observer on TV. I was like, whoa, that's never happened before.
Correct. But I didn't know it was The Observer. So right before we did the show, he said, hey, we want to do something controversial at the end of the show. The producer got with me and I said, okay, fine. What do you need? And this is literally right before we did the scene. He goes, Marrow just retweeted this. Would you do a rant on this? I said, okay. So I did a rant on it. Well, people took it out of context and said, oh, I was upset or jealous about the poll, which I didn't even know the poll existed 2 minutes before. I did a rant on the poll. I just assumed Marrow knew it was a work. It was a wrestling thing. It was a wrestling everything. In fact, the next day when I walked into TV, they said, hey, Meltzer's mad at you. He tweeted something about it. And I jokingly said, I didn't know he's still alive. And because I don't read in the dirt sheets. And they said, yeah. I said, why is Meltzer mad at me? And they said, well, because you bashed his poll. I didn't know it was his poll because when they put it up, I couldn't read it. It was too far away from me on the monitor, so I couldn't read it. Well, anyway, I think that had a problem with Marrow, was that poll and that me going on that rant. it was 100% of work. And then also he had some travel issues that weekend or something. And then all of a sudden he's gone. And people put 2 and 2 together and got 7. You know, I'm a heel commentator. Right. I did this rant on the Bring It to the Table, which literally was 100% work about a poll that I'd never seen before. I certainly wasn't upset about it. Well, then all of a sudden all this stuff came out that I ran off Marrow Ranallo out of WWE, which WWE did to my benefit, did a big long study about why Marrow left, internal from what they told me. My name was never mentioned in it. So, you know, I saw Marrow later. We were in New Orleans, and I went across the street. I saw him. I shook his hand just to, you know, let him know that there were certainly no hard feelings for me to him. He had got me UFC tickets before. I think Conor McGregor in Vegas. Really nice of him. I thought we were, I don't know about friends, but decent acquaintances is what I thought. But to my knowledge, I never did anything mean to Marrow, and I didn't think we had a bad relationship. That one thing was a misunderstanding, was about that show. Yeah. And look, Conrad, I'm not trying to rewrite history. Whatever I've done, I've done. I'm never shied away from responsibility for anything. But with Marrow, there was, to my knowledge, there was nothing there. I got a lot of the blame for it from people, you know, chanting Fire Bradshaw and all this stuff. But again, I didn't have any input really into Marrow getting hired. I did give him a recommendation when they showed me his video. I didn't get any input into Tom doing traffic. I didn't get any input into Marrow disappearing or leaving. I don't know if he left on his own. To this day, I have no idea whether Marrow left on his own or WWE left mutual. I have no idea what happened. They came back to NXT, and I have no idea, you know, afterwards what happened. I have had no contact with him.
The story I've heard, and we're not going to say any names here because they're still working for WWE, but the person who was a thorn in his side is not an on-camera personality at all in WWE. And I knew when that was coming out and everyone was saying, oh, JBL, I was like, I don't think that's John, but you know, we're not in the business of throwing our buddies under the bus, but it was not an on-camera personality. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Mick Foley experiment, because Mick has been pretty loud and proud about saying he did not enjoy.
Hey, and by the way, I want to give a shout out to Marrow. I think Marrow's great at what he does.
Yes, absolutely.
I have no issue with Marrow whatsoever. I had no issue with him. I enjoyed working with him. He was so fun. He knew so many different things. His vocabulary was so good. I enjoyed working with him. I really did. And I enjoy. You know, he called the fight recently with Jake Paul rather, and Tyson, and I thought he did a great job. You know, I enjoyed working with Marrow.
I think he is terrific. He does a fantastic job, and he's a longtime hardcore wrestling fans, and he's been open about his challenges with mental health and things like that. And I'm a big Marrow fan. So
he was fun to be around. You know, before you start the show, you sit around and banter all the time, you know, because you have nothing to do. You know, you got about 30, 45 minutes right before the show starts. That's when everything's boring because most things are done. Now, you know, when Vince was there, sometimes he was rewriting the show. Nowadays they don't. But it was fun to, you know, we would sort of sit around and just banter and just have fun. And Marrow was always part of that. I always enjoyed being around him. He's got a quick wit about him.
Let's talk about the Mick Foley experiment. You obviously were in the ring with Mick a bunch, and now you find yourself on the headsets in the same era that Mick was. Did you have conversations with Mick about how to deal with Vince or how to navigate all of this, or did that never really happen?
No, it did happen, and the story leading up to it's a pretty good one. I've got last week was show and tell with the Iraqi sword. This is a show and tell with a sword from Morocco. As you can see, the camel sheath right there.
Oh wow!
So we were in Spain, and went down. My wife came over and went down to Mallorca down there, and just hung out. Used our merit points to the Ritz, hung out like rich people, and so we took the ferry over to Morocco. And when we got over there, it was no tourists. There was a cold day. There was a snake charmer there. I've got a picture somewhere that was a snake charmer and put a snake on my neck and stuff. But there were no tourists there, so they're trying to sell stuff to us, And I like swords, so I bought this little cheap sword. It wasn't worth much money, and I bought it from him. And I said, "Hey, can I carry this back to Spain?" He goes, "Oh, I sold 6 yesterday," which I should have known was bullshit because there wasn't 6 people there. And he goes, "It's no problem, no problem." I said, "It's okay to go through customs with it." Now, this is right after 9/11. This is after 9/11. I don't have quick after, but it's after. So the world's changed. And I said, okay. So I got the sword. It's not in a bag or anything. And I didn't want it in a bag because I want people to think I'm hiding a sword getting on a ferry going through customs. So I'm told it's legal to go through customs. So I put it on the conveyor belt. And I'm sitting there thinking, God, this doesn't make any sense to me. I just put a freaking sword on a security conveyor belt. And the thing goes right through the conveyor belt. The two guys are sitting there talking. They're the ones in Morocco going to Spain. And they don't even look. And I thought, well, I guess it is legal. So now I've got it on the boat, and I'm debating whether to throw it away. And it wasn't very much money. And I thought, yeah, this doesn't seem right. So again, I go through customs again in Spain. I walk through it. Nobody says a word. I thought, well, I guess he's right. I guess it's fine to bring a sword into Spain. And so I walk out of the ferry terminal, and there's a police waiting on me to arrest me.
Oh.
And they're throwing me in jail. And I'm going, and I'm trying to, I can't figure out what's wrong. And I'm going, guys, I didn't want that freaking sword. A guy told me I could have it. Well, they don't speak much English. I don't speak much Spanish. I literally try to bribe the guy. I'm not kidding you. I stuck my wallet there. I said, you take that, take the sword. I'll walk out of here. This was a mistake. So the guy's written up this entire page of arrest. They're throwing me in jail. They've written this entire arrest. But it's like I'm sneaking dirty uranium into the country. It's like I'm in a weapons charge is what I'm getting. I'll never be able to travel again. I'm like, my whole life is ruined because of this stupid fucking sword. So I'm sitting there, well, you got to be kidding me. So finally a guy walks by just a little bit outside, and he stops and looks, and I could tell he recognizes me. Well, I'd been a heel in Spain. So I motioned him to come in. I said, hey, man. He goes, are you JBL? I said, yeah. And right away, I start throwing names like The Rock and Undertaker and Stone Cold out there because I'm thinking, if he hates me, he wants me to go to jail. I don't know how big a fan he is. I'm going, yeah, I'm friends with The Rock. I'm friends with Undertaker. I'm making up all this shit. And so the guy goes, what are you doing? I said, well, they're arresting me for this sword. He goes, oh, that's very illegal. And I'm like, I don't know whether it's illegal and very illegal, but it was apparently very illegal. I said, well, I didn't want the sword. I said, the guy told me it was okay to bring back. And I said, I brought it in because he said it was okay. I had no idea. There wasn't a sign that says don't bring swords into Spain. And so the guy goes, oh, my God, they're going to put you in jail. Like, you got to be kidding me. Right there, my wife comes in. She goes, what are you doing? And they let her in. And I said, well, they're arresting me for the sword. She goes, I told you. I said, now's not the time.
Yes.
Tell me I told you anything right now. I'm going to freaking Spanish jail. So anyway, the guy turns to the guy, and they're talking in Spanish so fast I can't understand anything they're saying. And the guy looks at me. He's been written up this whole page. He's written up about me, all in Spanish, so I can't read hardly any of it. He looks at me, looks at the guy, wads it up, throws it in the trash, gets the sword, and hands it to me.
Oh, my.
And I said, I don't want that sword. I'm like, dude, I almost went to jail for that sword. I don't want it. And the guy told me, it's okay, just take it. I go, no, it's not okay. You just told me it's very illegal. I'm not walking out of a police station with a freaking sword. That's very illegal. The guy goes, no, just take it. So all the guys around, like, take it. It's not a big deal. So I walked out of the police station with that sword. And I get out. I go to the nearest hotel. I go to the concierge, and I said, listen, I want you to mail this back to me, but you can mail this son of a bitch to the moon. I don't care where you mail it. Just get it away from me. I wanted to go back to my house. So I paid them to mail it. And by the time I got home, there it was. So that's,
oh, wow.
That's the sword. So when I come back to America, because we were on tour over there, I'm sitting there telling these guys a sword. I had just almost been thrown into a Spanish jail on weapons charges after 9/11. And Mick Foley's there, and he goes, hey, John, can I talk to you? And I'm telling this story about this sword. That's all I want to tell. I've got the greatest story ever. At least I think I do.
Sure.
And so I'm telling the story. He goes, John, I need to talk to you. And so finally I said, Mick, what is it? So Mick sat with me the whole flight. He goes, how do you deal with Vince? He goes, he's killing me. But that's when Mick had to talk with me about Vince. And it was hard for me to tell Mick what to do because I had a complete different relationship, and Booker did too, and King did too. And I don't doubt anything Mick said. Mick's a truthful guy. He's a very honest guy.
Yes.
And there's no reason for Mick to make anything up. So I don't know why the difference was between Mick and us three. I have no idea. And Mick didn't last much longer at all. He quit and wouldn't do it again. He didn't want to work with Vince, because Vince was just too tough on him. And, I've thought about it, and I don't know the answer. I don't know if Mick, didn't play like football like we did, and of course Booker didn't play football, but, the guy was in prison, so he had a pretty tough upbringing. and he had guys dealing with him in different ways, and maybe he couldn't handle. Maybe Mick couldn't. I have no idea what happened with Mick, but it seems like a complete departure from what happened with me, King, and Booker. But Mick's a truthful guy, so obviously whatever happened. I don't know why it happened to Mick and it didn't happen to us.
It is interesting because I have to admit I didn't really notice it until I started doing a podcast with Mick Foley, and I started to hear or see people on social who would point out, like, whenever there's highlight clips of the greatest moments in WWE history, and even like on the Signature Opens, there's all kinds of superstars who were shown there, but very rarely is Foley. And it just feels like, for whatever reason, maybe Vince through the years had a love-hate relationship with Mick. Would you think that might be true? And what would that be based on? Is it based on the fact that before he got signed, guys like JR were championing him for so long? Or is it based on Mick's politics? Because we know that he's on the other side of the aisle than Vince there. But Vince is always being favored by Mick. Mick speaks glowingly about Vince, but it does feel like that's not always reciprocated by Vince. Why do you feel that way? And if so, why do you think?
The political thing is interesting. We did a debate one time about Bush and Kerry, and Mick did a wonderful job, as you would expect. He's a very smart guy, very glib guy, a very well put together stuff. And I had a wonderful time with Mick. Kevin and Vince produced it, and they thought it was great. But obviously I'm more aligned with Kevin and Vince as far as politically. I didn't even think about it until you brought it up that, I don't know if that's part of the whole thing that's different for Mick. And I don't know that. I know Vince loved Mick and what he did for the business. I know when he fell off that huge cage, he told him how much he loved him. Don't ever do that again. I appreciate what you did. I think he loved that, but I think Mick fit into a box that Vince didn't understand. He understood the Morocco box. He understood a great big, muscle guy. That Morocco was very talented, obviously. He understood a Hulk Hogan box. He didn't understand I don't think the Mick Foley box. Foley did all that on his own. Foley created the three characters. He's in the Royal Rumble at 3 different people. Foley did some incredible stuff, year after year, decade after decade. And maybe it's because Vince couldn't put it in a box that he understood, because Foley's not in a box you can understand. I don't know. I don't know if there was any type of difference at all. I certainly I want to say I never saw it. All I ever saw from Vince toward Mick was nothing but love and respect. So I never saw it, but I don't know why the difference between commentary that I had an experience and why Mick had a different experience.
I do want to ask you about, when you were on the headsets, occasionally it feels like you would do something that felt out of character from real you. We know now that was definitely Vince, but one of those things was the Ascension. It was a tag team about 10 years ago, super nice guys. And, it became your mission to sort of shit on them.
Yeah.
And I got to feel like we just didn't see that story come to fruition. What was the plan, or can you just give us the backstory on you and Ascension?
Yeah, we had a plan. We had a plan for MVP too. MVP came in, and I would talk to Vince about all these different characters. That was what was so great. Now, you lost that a lot when you went to the creative production meeting, because you didn't have access to Vince like you did before. And so before that, I would go directly to Vince and I'd say, okay, how do you want to build this character? What do you see him doing? How high do you think this character is going to go? What can we do to help this character get over? Or where do we need him? What do we need this character for? And so he would always give me, the recommendation about what we're doing. So with MVP, it was like, hey, John, I don't think you'd like him. And Vince laid it out perfectly for me. He said, I think you're going to hate him because he's the guy that comes in that says he's better than everybody else. He's half man, half amazing. You're going to hate him. You're going to bash the shit out of him until you start loving him. And once you start loving him, you're going to be the one saying all of his catchphrases. You're half man, half amazing. Vince had the whole thing called. But MVP creative followed what Vince and I had for commentary, followed 100%. And MVP became this freaking massive star that he is to this day, which, is on him, not on me and Vince. He did that, not me. But, our role along that way was we had this thing planned as far as what we were going to do when he come in. And so, again, Conrad, you got to understand, like I said last week, this fire bad, water good, this cartoon idea of the world, that the world is black and white. It doesn't work in the real world. People want wrestling to be sophisticated, but then they say, well, no, the bad guy's got to be a bad guy. Okay, what if the bad guy hates another bad guy? Okay, well, now it's different. Does that make that bad guy even worse? Like we did with MVP, it worked. Ascension was the same way. So when the Ascension came in, I went to Vince and I said, I'm having a hard time getting a grasp of what I would think about Ascension. And Vince sat there and thought, he always come up with stuff, like that. He goes, I would imagine you would hate them. He goes, you would hate everything about these guys. They're going to bash the old guys. They're going to bash the new guys. They're going to say legacy doesn't matter. He goes, you will hate them. And I said, okay, cool. So I went to Ascension and I said, hey guys, listen, I'm going to bash you on commentary. Here's why. And they both right away said, oh yeah, we're the young guys. I said, no, this has nothing to do with hazing. This has nothing to do with a rite of passage. This is storyline driven. And I said, what we're going to do. And I told them exactly what we did with MVP. I said, here's what we're going to do. And here's how we're going to try to get you over by me being a heel and hating a heel. And I said, it's worked several times before. We've done it before. I think it'll work with you guys. The problem with Ascension was creative didn't follow. If they had kept beating guys, it works. Because now I'm saying these guys are the shits. They can't carry the Road Warriors jocks. They're terrible. They have no respect for legacy. Ron and I would have killed them, blah, 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 if they keep beating people. Yeah. The problem was they quit beating people.
Yeah.
So now I'm burying them and they're losing.
That's bad.
That just sticks them 12 feet under the dirt, not 6 feet under the dirt. It absolutely kills them. That's why when you do commentary, it's not real sports. If you have somebody that is going to win, you can say this guy has no chance whatsoever. He has no chance whatsoever. The only chance this guy has is the other guy missed his plane this morning. There's no chance this guy has a chance of winning. You can say that if you know he's going to win. If he's going to lose and you know that, all you've done is bury him. So there's a reason to do commentary a certain way. And with Ascension, I thought we were hitting it out of the park. I really did. Now, all the dirt sheets, from what I heard, were just crucifying me. Maybe the worst commentator of the year. That was 100% a plan from me and Vince to get these guys over. And I remember, I'll tell you a funny story. Animal texted me, the Road Warriors. He goes, man, thanks for sticking up for us. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, Animal. Oh, my you of all people should know better than this. And so as I would say, can't carry the Road Warriors jocks, all this stuff. The problem was creative didn't follow up with it. And because of that, it just buried them. So it was the commentary, 100%. 100% that was the right thing to do. The problem was the creative didn't follow.
When you're thinking about your run as a commentator, I think your first WrestleMania would have been WrestleMania 29. Is that right? East Rutherford, New Jersey. Does that seem right?
But I say that again. I'm sorry. Your
first WrestleMania was in New Jersey. Rock and Cena, Punk and Undertaker. Is that right? As far as commentary,
it sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that just another day at the office? Do you feel even bigger pressure because it's WrestleMania? I know what it's like I shouldn't say I know what it's like. I've never done it, but I'm saying we've heard from performers what a big deal it is to be on their first WrestleMania. At this point, man, you've been in the ring. You've main evented WrestleManias. You've been a part of them for a long time, but to have that pressure as a commentator, does that feel special or different or your first WrestleMania?
Absolutely. 100% because this is the moment of these guys' lives. I headlined WrestleMania and I was hoping I'd get to do it another couple times. I got hurt, never did. So that was my one time. The headline. And I haven't gone back and listened to commentary. I haven't even watched the match. I didn't watch my old stuff. I was just one of those guys that didn't. But the commentators were there. That was the one chance they had to make my moment that for the rest of my life will be one of the most important moments in my career. Since I was a kid, I told my grandfather I wanted to be a professional wrestler. I want to be a world champion. And all of a sudden I ended up at WrestleMania. And now this to me that's the highlight of my career. Based upon what I've, worked my whole life for. And there's other things. I understand that. But this is for everybody. WrestleMania is the moment. And so when you're sitting there, it doesn't matter if it's the first match, it doesn't matter if it's the last match. This is their WrestleMania moment. And that is incredibly important. And so I always would talk to the talent. I would talk to everybody. I want to put them over absolutely as best as I can. Because that moment to them, they may never be back. You don't know. You don't know if you're going to come back and headline the next 12 WrestleManias. You may, but you may be done the way injuries happen and things like that. So, yeah, I wouldn't say huge pressure. I enjoyed it because I thought, if I can talk with these guys, and I always was able to talk to them on a contemporary level, which, anybody who's been in the business can, or anybody who's been around the business can. And I was able to get things out of them. What do you want me to say? And most of the guys, when you talk about commentary, your top guys always came and talked to you. Your underneath guys never did. They didn't understand it, but it was important. And so, yeah, I thought there was huge pressure on WrestleMania to do as good a job as I could for these guys because it was so important to them. And I didn't want to, I knew they're going to do their part. I didn't want to drop the ball on my part.
I do want to ask you about some other big moments that happened. Like, I don't even remember, but I don't think you were at the desk. What can you tell us about when Jerry Lawler has a heart attack at the desk? Are you doing commentary, or is that when you get the call? Or, I mean, that feels like a major moment in WWE history, but from an announcing side, it might be the biggest moment. Nothing like this has ever happened before.
Yeah, and he was so lucky that he had Doc Samson there who saved his life.
Yes.
He hadn't had the doc there, Lawler's dead. In fact, Lawler got up to Montreal. They had to have cash. Thank God he had been in an appearance. And so he had cash with him to, get the medical stuff paid for because the insurance wasn't going to, whatever it was, wasn't going to work up there. I was in Africa and I was either building a school for, I built some schools down there for, kids in poverty areas. I was either building a school or climbing a mountain. It'd be Kilimanjaro if I was climbing a mountain. I can't remember. I was coming back and they called me. I think it's Michael. It's always they. I think it's Michael Cole called me and said, "Hey man, Jerry had a heart attack on air." And I said, "Oh my God, is he okay?" And he said, "Yeah, he's going to make it." And he goes, "Would you take his spot till he gets back?" And I said, "The only way I'll do it is if the second he's ready, he gets his job back." I said, "I'm not under no circumstances am I filling in for him and then continuing." And he said, "Okay, deal." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "We're in California." So I had like an extra 6 hours to my trip. So I told King, I called King. I said, "Next time you dial on air, could you do it like on the East Coast where I don't have to fly to freaking California to fill in for you?"
Oh my gosh. I wanted to ask you about some of the other commentators that maybe we don't spend enough time talking about, but of course we're an English speaking podcast. So we're only talking about English commentary. But there was a Spanish commentary desk, a French commentary desk, a German commentary desk. You remember hearing any fun moments about any of those desks?
Oh shit, the Germans were great. Karsten was such a great guy. I love Karsten. To this day, he thinks it's a rib, and it's not a rib. It's Karsten. This is not a rib. I'm going to tell you for the last. No, I'm going to tell you for the last time. I'm going to tell you every time I see you. So we're doing a match with, I think, Bobby Lashley. I think it was Bobby when he came through the cage. I can't remember where it was. I think it was Bobby got thrown in with maybe I can't remember what it was. He came through the cage. Anyway, I had my energy drink with me, and at the end of one of the matches, Shane or somebody had to come off the cage and go through our table. They had like a crash pad underneath it, but I had the drink there underneath the cowl of the table. And I thought if he hits that, he'll break his hip or, something on that thing. So I wanted to get rid of it. So I thought, well, shit, I got to get rid of this thing somewhere. So I turned over to, I think it was Karsten at the German table. I said, "Karsten, would you put that on your table just out of the way?" Because I knew my table was going to be destroyed and I didn't want somebody to hit it and get hurt. Well, it wasn't within 30 seconds of me saying that. I think it was Lashley got thrown through the cage, the whole cage door, which I didn't know was going to happen. I had no idea that was going to happen. Cole's cage door comes down and comes down like this and hits the German table and knocks that drink that he had just put in front of him all over the two German announcers right before their own camera. They're soaked in this energy drink. It looks like the greatest rib ever. And I just started laughing because there's no way to this day they believe I didn't do that on purpose. We go to commercial break and they are so fucking mad at me, Conrad. I said, Carson, I swear to you, I did not do that on purpose. He goes, "Oh yeah, big bully JBL, just ribbing us Germans. Don't worry about us." I'm going, I didn't do it on purpose. I swear to you, I didn't. To this day, they don't believe I did it on purpose. But that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen when that drink hit and just got launched over the two German announcers. And they're so covered in this shit that they can't do it on camera.
I love that story. I do. I mean, I never really thought about it until just now, though. If Vince is producing you guys, is anybody producing international?
No. And I asked that question a million times. I would ask that question a million times. I said, "Listen, these guys seem great." And they do. The French guys, the German guys, all the guys seem great. They're very talented professionals. I said, "Does anybody know what they're saying?" And everybody would tell me the same thing. No. I said, "Well, how do you know they're pushing the right stuff? How do you know they're not going to business for themselves?" Which I didn't think they were, but you got to tweak everything. No one had any idea what they were saying. None. I mean, here's a multi-billion-dollar company, and you had no idea what these announcers are saying. None. Talk about falling between the cracks. I told you before about Tito Santana. Tito was not that great in Spanish. And so they put Tito on commentary, and he talked to Hugo. I forget who it was I told about it. And Hugo was right there. And I said, ask him. Oh, it was Dolph, I believe. I told Dolph about it. Hugo walked up and they asked him about it. And he goes, all he'd say was Arriba. So they go to Vince. They go, Vince, Tito doesn't speak Spanish that fluently. Vince goes, oh, he'll be fine. Wait a minute. You're putting a guy on commentary who doesn't speak the language. So Tito, who's this wonderful human being that everybody loves, the guys would bitch about him because, Tito is not that fluent in Spanish. But Vince had him on commentary.
I knew there was a reason he was Dave Silva's favorite wrestler. Did you know that? Tito Santana is Dave Silva's favorite wrestler, and Dave Silva.
I had no idea. I love Tito. I don't know him that well. I met his daughter with the stem cell stuff. Wonderful young lady, Jenny, and helped me with some of the stem cells. And I got to see Tito some of the Hall of Fame stuff. Just a wonderful guy, just a great character. Done great things teaching school. He's just a cool dude.
We got a few questions I want to get to. Chris says, my favorite moment of you on commentary was when Kevin Owens was fighting outside the ring and knocked your hat to the ground. Kevin picked it up and calmly said, I got carried away, John. When something organic like that happens, does Vince laugh, get mad, or nothing?
No, Vince laughs. He thinks it's funny. Vince loves stuff like that. Vince hates when things are normal and things where you can predict things. Vince hates things like that. Vince loves people that are glib. He loves stuff that, Vince famously, when he walked out with The Rock at some WrestleMania or something, he was about to walk out with The Rock, and right as he walked out, he goes, listen to this pop. Of course, it's all for The Rock. Vince loved a rib, and he loved when things like that happen. Kevin Owens is one of those guys who's a very, very smart guy and was so good at what he does. It was always fun to have him out there. It was a lot of fun to have a lot of talent out there that were fun.
I do want to ask, this is a fun one from Aldo. When Vito started wearing the dress, what was Vince McMahon's reaction to John's hilarious commentary? And can he call Michael Cole a fruit booty one more time?
I don't think you can call anybody a fruit booty anymore. It was a different era back then. Vince thought it was funny. And Vince just loves stuff like that. He loves, you can't do away with a lot of those words and phrases that you use now. And rightfully so. Like, I'm not bitching about the new generation, but it was fun. Vince loved when I do stuff like that. Vince loved when I did the stuff with Booker. When Booker, the queen of, and I was talking about the queen of Charmel and all the stuff that I do about Camelot and all the stuff. Vince would just tell people, lay out, let John talk. Because I would just make shit up about, because I love Booker so much. I'd make shit up about him and Charmel. Vince loves stuff like that.
Here's another one. Guy W. John says, are there times where commentators are not supposed to acknowledge some of the things a vocal crowd is chanting? Let's talk about that, because the crowd sometimes, they don't always follow the script. Some of these crowds don't know how to work. They're not doing what we expect. What is is there a best practice as a commentator for what you acknowledge or don't acknowledge? Because some of those chants, it's not the narrative WWE is pushing, and other chants, I don't think you can say that on TV.
Yeah, and that's a problem with the stuff you can't say on TV. They start chanting the F word and stuff like that. I don't know what the TV does about that, because that's a real problem with the commissions that you have. But Vince never wanted to run from it. Vince didn't care what the fans did. Vince just wanted the fans to be involved. That's all he cared about, was make sure the fans are involved. He didn't care what they chanted, and even if it was negative to the product, he'll switch the product. I mean, Vince loved the interaction. As long as the fans are involved, Vince didn't care. And as far as responding to it, we'd respond as the best way we could. Now, if there's profanity in it, you can't, because you got problems with rules violations.
We got tons of questions about people you wish you maybe could have done commentary with. This is a good one from Adam Arpin. Is there anybody John wishes he could have done commentary for his matches that he was never able to? For example, I think Bobby Heenan would have had a field day doing color for the JBL SmackDown era. I love that idea, the imagery of him calling the JBL SmackDown era, Bobby Heenan, that is. But is there somebody out there besides Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler that you wish you could have worked with that you never really got the chance to?
Of course, the best ever, Bobby Heenan. There's no doubt about it. Heenan was a different level from everybody else. And there's no one close. Lawler's the only one that would be second to Heenan. I think Corey Graves has done a wonderful job. I think Pat McAfee's a great announcer. I think Wade Barrett's a great announcer. I love Booker T. But Bobby Heenan was different from everybody else. Him and Gorilla maybe the greatest team of all time. Gorilla was so understated in what he did and what he said. And Heenan, to me, if I could have worked with Heenan, man, I couldn't have kept up with him, I don't think. But, man, that God almighty, I'd have loved to work with that guy. He did his Hall of Fame speech, I think, in 96. And you couldn't understand every word he said because his voice was already starting to go with him, which I always hated because like a guy like Muhammad Ali, you don't want guys like that to lose their voice, And Heenan was the same way. He got 2 standing ovations during his Hall of Fame speech, and you couldn't even understand him that well. I mean, he was just a different level. And by the way, talk about stuff you can't say anymore. Gorilla Monsoon used to say, well, we're getting down to the short strokes. Talking about we're almost to a pay-per-view.
Oh, my God.
Gorilla, you can't say that.
Oh, my God.
Gorilla would say anything. I remember Jesse Ventura one time took us some girls. Look at those little rats right there. That's some good-looking Jesse, please.
My God. I do want to ask you a couple more questions about being a commentator with WWE. We've talked to Tony and to JR, and they've expressed the challenges and the differences that exist when you go from a 2-man booth to a 3-man booth. And at times with WWE, it's a 4-man booth. Do you have a preference, and what is that? And is there a least favorite?
Yeah, a 2-man booth to me, I think is the way you're should do it. I think it's so much easier. And what you want is, to me, a play-by-play guy that's pretty straight, but that is more of the baby face. Not a complete baby face, but more straight, I think, because that way he can bounce stuff off of you and correct you in certain things and go on with other stuff. I think when you have a 3-man booth, sometimes it can be hard because the baby face has to get their point in, the heels has to get their point in, and the play-by-play guy is trying to call the match. I think a 2-man booth to me works better, but 3 talented guys, 4 talented guys can make anything work. You can have 6 guys out there if they're talented, and they're going to make it work. It's all about talent.
From a COVID standpoint, I mean, you were able to do some COVID commentary, and these are empty arenas at that point. You just talked about, Vince doesn't mind what the fans are saying. He just wants them engaged. How different of an experience is that? I mean, looking back, it kind of feels surreal that we ever did it. You were there doing it.
Yeah.
How challenging was it with no crowd?
That was horrible. I mean, absolutely horrible. It was so hard to do because think about, I think this was Al Michaels who called the Do You Believe in Miracles? The miracle nights. The thing I always say is, what did he say right after that? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Where you lay out is so important because you want to let the crowd react. You want it to be organic. You want to let the crowd respond and tell these guys what they need to be doing. And if they're not there, you've got to be the crowd. And that is so freaking weird to do. So when you see a big bump and you see a big thing down, that's when you lay out and let the crowd react, and they're going to start chanting, this is awesome, or whatever they want to chant. That's not there. You've got to talk over it. It is so uncomfortable to do that. It was one of the weirdest things I ever did. Now, my role was not that bad. The guys in the ring, I don't know how they did it. Sami Zayn made so much out of that. He was wrestling Daniel Bryan. He was screaming every time he'd kick him because you could hear him. Unlike in a WrestleMania where you couldn't hear him. So Sammy's screaming. He's crying at one point. It was so entertaining. I'm sitting there going, this guy, Sami Zayn, what a freaking genius this guy is. He totally capitalized on the situation. Most of the guys, weren't able to do that because they're so busy trying to do the match, doing all this stuff. And Sammy had to do a little different character to be able to do that. But I remember they had a ladder match. They did some big bump off the ladder, and they said, stop, let's do that again. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's bad enough when you're fresh and hot to do this. Now to go back up a ladder and all of a sudden just take a stunt bump. I mean, that was really hard on the talent. As far as the commentators, it was really uncomfortable, but the talent had it much harder than we did.
Instagram Wrestling Historian over on Twitter wants to know, John, why did you stop doing commentary?
I didn't like the travel. It wasn't the commentary. It was the travel. I was living in Bermuda and I was traveling, two flights almost every week, sometimes all the way to the West Coast. And I just didn't like the travel. I loved the commentary. If I could have done commentary in my house, I'd have done it forever, and they move on, and now they've got, great commentaries out there, and there's not a spot for me, and there shouldn't be because these guys are fantastic. But the main thing was, it was just the travel. I got tired of getting on a plane every week. I have 6.3 million miles on American Airlines alone. And I'm sick of getting on. I still hate it to this day, getting on planes. It wore me out. For a while when I was in New York, I told Vince, I said, Vince, I don't want to get on a plane anymore. He goes, well, fly with me. So for a while I was flying, with Vince. I go up to Westchester. He had a car for me. It was really nice. And, flying private is that one level of rich that, is really worth it. That's a level of luxury that is really a different level, and it was wonderful. But then I moved to Bermuda. And I had an extra flight every single week, and I just got tired of flying. I love the commentary, and I love trying to help get guys over, trying to help create things for guys, and I love the interaction with Vince as far as into his mindset, especially about how to work the commentary because of where we're going with this character. And there was almost always a plan for that.
What was the highlight when you think back about your commentary experience? Is there one moment that you're proud of or you think of the most?
Several. I was not doing the commentary when I saw Umaga and Cena have a match. I believe it was in San Antonio. I don't know. It could have been anywhere. I don't remember what it was. It was Rumble or SummerSlam or whatever it was, where Umaga ran across the 3 desks and did the big splash. And I remember sitting there, and I don't think I was doing commentary because when I wasn't in a big match, I was sitting ringside, so I had the best seat in the house. I'd take my headphones off, and I just want to listen to the crowd. I didn't want to hear the commentators. I just want to listen to the crowd, be a fan. And I had ringside seat. And I remember sitting there watching that match go, man, this is why people love this business. These two guys are just, my God, these guys are good. I remember just watching thinking, man, it was so fun to be a part of. I remember being part of, the Undertaker's, the streak being broken. Michael Cole was going to say, and the streak continues. We didn't know the finish. And so when he says the streak ends, and Michael looked at me like, what the fuck just happened? And I'm like, oh my God, we were as shocked as anybody. Because sometimes when you do a match, it's important to know the finish. Because as I say, if a guy's winning, you can dictate your commentary completely different than if the guy's losing. But if it's two big stars and the finish is really inconsequential because the match is going to be a toss-up either way, you don't need to know. And so we could have found out, but we didn't need to know. I kind of wish I'd found out because I wish I had a little better out with Undertaker walking up the ramp. I wish I had something in mind about Wyatt Earp leaving the OK Corral, and it was too late. It was already time to lay out. I wish I could have had something a little bit quicker for that. But it was so fun calling these big matches. I remember calling Dolph's Money in the Bank cash-in. Oh, my God. To this day, I don't know how a crowd could be a bigger pop than that. That was insane with him and Del Rio. I called the Money in the Bank cash-in with Seth Rollins out at WrestleMania. I mean, that was the heist of the century, as Michael called it. We didn't know he was coming out. We didn't want to know. We just wanted to react. A lot of things you want to know, things like that, we don't need to know. Let us just react. Let us see it for the first time and let us call it, because that to me becomes fun. You don't need to have stuff in the bag that you have to say. Just trust yourself enough to be able to say something.
I love that you've been a fun follow on social media for a long time. And years before I knew you, you'd take photos every day and say, best day ever. And I like that you're always Mr. Positive. However, is there a low light in commentary where you think back and you think, boy, that might have been near the worst day ever?
No. I mean, we had some days where we weren't as good, and it was tough, and when you have, sometimes I tell you what the problem is when you have bad matches, not necessarily bad matches, but matches that don't mean anything. You put, people out there you don't know, and I tell you, you have some guys out there that create stuff, that create really cool stuff. Wade Barrett is he's a really smart guy, brilliant guy. But when he came out, there was not a lot of background to him. So Michael Cole came up with the idea of the bare knuckle fighting. That was all Michael Cole. And so when he came up with it, I said, hey, man, I've been reading this book on Bartley Gorman, whose nephew, Jerry Gorman, does unlicensed boxing matches in London, who's a Facebook friend. And they called it the Bullhammer when Bartley was supposedly the only undefeated bare knuckle fighter ever. The King of the Gypsies is the title now that Tyson Fury has. But Bartley Gorman was the man. So we created this whole backstory for Wade Barrett and created this whole thing for him. That was just us on commentary, and we end up with something really cool out of it. And Wade ends up with Bad News Barrett. We did it off the JBL and Cole show. That was a lot of fun to do. And it was fun to be part of the show as sometimes you create stuff. I talked to some network executives a while back, and they talked about the Hogan versus Savage match with Elizabeth as the kind of the prize. Do you know who told that story?
Gorilla Monsoon, because Savage would tell his story about Hogan is jealous, Hogan is this, Hogan is that, and the way you'd put the video together, it looked like Savage was correct because they're two baby faces. They're fighting over a woman. It's a very easy to understand, as Vince would say, storyline. Well, Hogan wouldn't tell his part. It was relied on Gorilla Monsoon to tell Hogan's part. That, to me, is when commentary gets done right. There's so many guys. Cena would always come to us and say, okay, guys, here's what we're doing. Here's what part of the match is as a favor to us. Most of your top guys would. Your underneath guys and girls, they wouldn't understand how important it was, or they thought they didn't have the access because they were young. They did have the access. We're begging for information on people, especially people that don't have a huge background. If a guy comes into wrestling and he doesn't have a huge sports background or doesn't have a huge MMA background or any other type of background like that, you got to manufacture it for them. Because you need that, you need stuff to talk about in dead spots of matches to make people care about things like that. And when announcers get it right, like Gorilla got it right with Hogan, that changes the arc of the whole entire company, and that's pretty cool.
John, I can't thank you enough for today's episode. I hate to say it, but I think maybe we saved the best for last. This was our last Something to Wrestle of the year, and this has been one of my favorite episodes I've done all year with any of my shows. So thank you for all the time. But the name and the title today is about Vince McMahon, and as 2024 comes to a close, I've taken a little bit of criticism this year for saying, I don't think we've seen the last of Vince McMahon in wrestling. As 2025 creeps up upon us just 2 days away, what do you think? Do you think we'll see Vince McMahon do something else in wrestling, or is that it for Vince in professional wrestling?
I don't know about wrestling, but I will tell you what I know. And, Black Bart used to always tell me, you can only go by how guys treat you, not by, what else has happened or hasn't happened. So I'm not responding to anything like that. I'm just about how Vince has always treated me, which is, almost like a son. And Vince, I saw him at WrestleMania right before they made the announcement that they're selling the company to TKO. And I found him back, I think it was WrestleMania. I found him back in a dressing room. It was unmarked. It was way back down there. And I found him. And I walked in and hugged him and shook his hand. And I said, I'm so glad you didn't go quietly into the night. And he looked at me with this fire in his eyes like I've hardly ever seen. He goes, you fucking knew I wouldn't do that. And I said, yep, that's exactly what the response I thought I'd get. I don't think Vince is done. I don't think he wants his last act to be what it is now. And I'm speaking for him, which is something you shouldn't do. I think he's going to do something else. And I don't know what that is. He's doing something in Hollywood, it sounds like. I have no inside information on this whatsoever, just a knowledge of knowing him and his competitiveness over the years that, he didn't want to go quietly into the night. He does not want to go away. And I say go away not because of relevancy, because when Vince is a competitor, he loves competing. And without that competition, I'm not sure Vince finds a lot of satisfaction in life. And so I think he's going to do something else. I don't know about wrestling, but something else. I think in 2025 we will see Vince McMahon doing something else.
In 2025, will we see John Layfield doing more in wrestling?
A lot more. I got some really cool plans that are starting to come to fruition that will come starting, I won't say when, but starting fairly soon. And I got to look, it's like we have a great idea, it works until it doesn't, but I've got I think a really freaking cool idea and some good people to do it with. So this year it's going to be attempted. I can tell you that 100% for sure. It's going to be attempted, and whether it works or not, we'll see. I think it will. I'm working my ass off right now to make it happen. But 2025, I got a couple of really big things already, not only tentatively planned, scheduled, and in the calendar planned that I've got down, and I'm building stuff around it right now to try to get to those two different places. And so yes, I got something huge that I've been planning as for better part of a year of wanting to do stuff, and that it's going to all come to fruition, and either it's going to work big or I'm going to go down in flames. One of the two. I don't care which. I'm going all in.
Well, we appreciate you going all in on Something to Wrestle. I, like you, don't know how much longer you're going to be our substitute teacher here on the program. But, man, I've had a freaking blast with you, and I hope that you have had half as much fun as Silva and I have, because we've had Such a great time. And this is not the end, by the way. We think John's going to be here next week. We'll find out. But we don't know when the principal's coming back to town. But
Bruce may come back and fire me, that bastard.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you just can't get enough John Layfield, did you know he's got his own podcast with Gerald Briscoe? It's called Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. You can catch it anywhere you enjoy podcasts. Yes, it's on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. That's Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. They've got hundreds of episodes, and they're always finding time to go to the far reaches. I mean, you talk about legends. They've interviewed hundreds of legends. It's totally free, available for you now, anywhere you enjoy podcasts. Just look for Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. I can't wait for 2025, man. I know we're going to be doing more of these pods, and I can't wait to see what's next for you and Vince McMahon, maybe doing more. We'll see. Stay tuned, everybody. Have a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2025 right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.
Give the ultimate gift to the wrestling fan in your life this holiday season. The gift of ad-free shows. Head over to AdFreeGift.com now to purchase an ad-free show subscription for a friend or loved one. The best value in wrestling podcasts with several plans to choose from. Starting as low as just $9 a month. You're gifting early ad-free access to Conrad Thompson's weekly podcast, plus access to the full podcast archive library and access to the Patreon, where you can join the community chat and submit your questions for the shows. Want more? Plans starting at $29 a month get access to over 100,000 hours of other exclusive content from legends like The Godfather, Tully Blanchard, Lex Luger, David Crockett, Downtown Bruno, and many more. Plus, interactive Q&As and watch-alongs with your favorite podcast hosts and Hall of Famers. Let's hear from some of our ad-free shows family members.
Listening to podcasts without ads is pretty cool, but listening to bonus exclusive content is even better.
AFS has meant so much to me through the moments and memories created.
My friendships that I've made so far, it's been one heck of an experience.
Not only do you get great content and so much historical information, but you're also part of a community here, even more so a family.
So many different walks of life being brought together by one commonality of wrestling.
The community and the family feel with all the members who have been very welcoming.
How many places do you get to go to actually interview stars like Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff?
When I joined AdFreeShows, Eric actually called me to thank me personally. That moment made me realize just how special this community is.
And it's a global family.
It's a family that I never dreamed of having. It's been a heck of a ride, and can't wait for more to come.
Thank you, AdFreeShows, for celebrating wrestling's greatest era and for making podcasts that are just too sweet. And just know that you've got a member for life.
Visit AdFreeGift.com today and gift an Ad-Free Shows membership to the wrestling fan in your life this Christmas.